across more central and southern parts of Scotland, and by the morning most of the wet and wintry weather will have cleared through Northern Ireland, and it will be clearing away from parts of northern England too. Further south it's a milder start to the day. There will be some outbreaks of rain, but again most of that will be clearing away towards the east as we go through the morning. A lot of dry weather then following in behind, and things should turn a bit sunnier as well for many places, especially towards the north, but towards the southwest here there will be some outbreaks of rain around, and some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. We will see our temperatures actually dropping for some places as we go through the day, a real chilly feel to things, and with some brisk winds coming in from the north it is going to feel particularly cold indeed. We stick with that northerly wind as we go through the end of the day, so still some wintry showers particularly across northern parts of Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland too, and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind. And that's the theme as we go through the rest of the week really, a cold feel with some wintry showers at times. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
A very good afternoon to you and a happy Monday. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, in one of his final acts as US President, Joe Biden has given permission to Ukraine to launch missiles into Russia. The Kremlin and Donald Trump's top team have accused Biden of pouring oil on the fire of World War III. Was it provocative or the principled thing to do? And Jet Set Starmer's global tour continues, with the G20 summit seeing the Prime Minister chalk up his 10th foreign trip in just 2 months. Well, we've had 2-tier Keir and free gear Keir. Now it's never here, Keir. Is it right for Starmer to be living la vida loca while furious farmers rally back in Blighty? We'll ask our man in Brazil, Chris Hope. And tomorrow, thousands of angry farmers are set to descend on Westminster to protest against the Prime Minister. They're now calling Keir Starmer the farmer harmer. On today's show, I'll be joined by farmer Clyde Bailey and his 12-year-old lad, Henry, who desperately wants to plough the same furrow as his dad. But he's heartbroken it might not be possible. And a British TikToker has sparked outrage by declaring, "Let's make Christmas Palestinian." With Christmas carols, school nativity plays, Christmas markets and pantos increasingly having references to Christmas airbrushed out or even removed to appease a vocal minority. Are we in danger of seeing Christmas this year cancelled? That's all coming up on today's show. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. So, tomorrow, just 24 hours' time, thousands of angry farmers are set to descend on the capital. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, the Cuba Libras are flowing at the G20. Is it really the right thing for a Prime Minister to be doing, living la vida loca at the Copacabana? While back here, farmers are just desperate about their future. I'm delighted to say I'll be joined in a short while by a farmer, Clyde Bailey, and his 12-year-old son, Henry. I've just met them in the studio. Wonderful, wonderful people. They're deeply concerned about the future of British farming. And the young lad, Henry, just 12, has got a message for the Prime Minister while he's away on his jollies. Get in touch the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But now here's your headlines, and it's Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. The time is 2 minutes past 3, and these are your latest headlines. Sir Keir Starmer says a strong UK-China relationship is important for both our countries as he met Chinese President Xi Jinping on the fringes of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir also suggested a full UK-China meeting in London or Beijing as part of his desire for what he called consistent, durable, respectful ties between the two countries. Sir Keir Starmer became the first Prime Minister to meet the Chinese presidents since 2018. With world leaders attending the G20 summit in Brazil, the PM says Ukraine is top of his agenda and told reporters there's got to be full support as long as it takes. Sir Keir says we need to double down on support for Ukraine as President Joe Biden has given the green light for Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. President Vladimir Putin warned the West they would be throwing fuel on the fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied cruise and ballistic missiles at Russia. This decision from Biden seems to have been prompted by a move from North Korea, in which they've sent thousands of troops to fight with Russia. Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge says the move from the US president is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion. A dictatorship invading a democracy, so it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand the US State Department, they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances, this decision is justified.
Meanwhile, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told GB News earlier the government are also committed to helping the Ukrainian people.
We stand steadfast behind the Ukrainian people, behind the Ukrainian government. That was the case under the last Conservative government, and there was cross-party support in the face of Russian aggression for the Ukrainian people. We continue to maintain that position, and as we enter almost the 1,000th day of the conflict, I think it really brings into sharp focus the sacrifices of the Ukrainian people. And the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary, from our point of view, will always continue to keep under review what is necessary by way of military aid for the Ukrainian people.
Elsewhere in politics, Sir Keir Starmer says he's absolutely confident that the vast majority of farms and farmers will not be affected by changes to inheritance tax announced in the budget. The row over the taxes for farms worth more than £1 million continues, as the PM said last night that the money the government has put into the sector is not to be overlooked. A protest is expected in Westminster tomorrow as farmers rally on Whitehall against the changes announced in last month's budget, while separately the National Farmers Union will hold a mass lobby of MPs in their effort to get the government to rethink. Burglars raided the Windsor Castle estate while the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children reportedly slept nearby, although the King and Queen were not in residence. The Sun has reported that 2 men are said to have climbed a 6-foot fence at night and stolen farm vehicles during the raid last month. They used a stolen truck to break through a gate said to be the nearest exit for the Prince, Princess and their children before targeting Shaw Farm, a working farm inside the estate. The pair remain at large. And TV presenter Davina McCall has made an enormous leap forward in the last 24 hours. That's according to an update posted by her partner on Instagram. Michael Douglas has thanked well-wishers, adding that Davina is out of the ICU and is loving awareness. 57-year-old Davina has revealed in a video posted on Instagram earlier on Friday she had a benign brain tumour, a colloid cyst, which she described as very rare. For now, those are your latest GB News headlines, and now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophie. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has been in Brazil for the G20 summit, where earlier this afternoon he met Chinese President Xi Jinping. Let's go live now to Rio and speak to GB News' political editor, Chris Hope, our man in Brazil. Chris, so there you are, the Prime Minister, Jet Set Starmer, on his 10th foreign jolly, living La Vida Loca. Meanwhile, back in Blighty, the farmers are revolting. Is it the right thing for him to be doing, and what's he up to?
Yeah, I'm here in Brazil at the Christ the Redeemer statue, which looks out over Rio. You're seeing it there in your pictures now, Martin. Sir Keir Starmer is here leading the UK delegation to the G20. He was in Baku last week, a 5,000-mile round trip, and now 11,000 miles to the G20. This is what the Prime Minister, of course, should do. He's battling for Britain on a world stage. Earlier he met with President Xi, the Chinese president. That's the first face-to-face meeting between the Prime Minister and the president of China since 2018. Of course, that relationship's been in a deep freeze since then. Some positive remarks came out of it. For the Chinese, the Xinhua news agency says that UK and China should uphold their strategic partnership and open up new prospects in bilateral relations. And for the UK, we've been told that Sir Keir Starmer wants a strong UK-Chinese relations, important for both countries and for the broader international community. He's focusing on trade. He recognises that China is one of the biggest global economies. It's important we can trade with them, and that's why he's so keen to speak to them. And, you know, we have heard from the Tories today, seeing Duncan Smith saying he's concerned we are kowtowing to them. I think a new government coming in for number 10, it's time to reset relationships that got a bit strained on the Conservatives, and that's why they're meeting. But overshadowing all of that today is Ukraine. Now, we know from authoritative reports in the States say that the US is allowing Ukraine to fire these long-range missiles deep into the heart of Russia, possibly targeting Russian and North Korean troops. We have yet to hear from Sir Keir Starmer or from France, the countries that make these Storm Shadow missiles. That is really threatening. Some Russian MPs saying it could be a start of World War III. We're waiting to see how that will raise the temperature in a very, very hot Rio.
And there has been a political row, of course, kicking off about that act of allowing Ukraine to fire missiles into Russian territory. Joe Biden, of course, only has 11 weeks left of his presidency, and the Kremlin are saying this is pouring oil onto the fire, and Trump's top team saying likewise, calling Biden a warmonger. Very, very difficult and precipitous times we are upon us, Chris.
Yeah, very difficult times. Donald Trump, of course, says he will end the war on day one. He takes over on January the 20th. Until then, it looks like Joe Biden is very keen to draw down that £60 billion arms package approved by Congress, and also sanctioning the use of these long-range weapons into Ukraine. So clearly it makes it harder and harder, maybe, for the Republican incoming president-elect to deal with that, and maybe to de-escalate the war if he wants to, the more committed the US is heading into that. We haven't heard, as far as I know, from President Trump and whether he approves of this sanctioning of the Storm Shadow missiles. We are waiting for all this to be confirmed on the record. But of course, Putin isn't here. The Russian President Vladimir Putin is not at the G20. However, his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov is, and we'll see how that plays out. But the points you made at the beginning there about not here, Keir, I think there are, he will face questions from farmers as they descend on Westminster tomorrow. Where is the Prime Minister? Why hasn't he met us yet? We know, of course, that Steve Reed, the DEFRA Secretary, has been trying to help the NFU, the Farmers Union, work out the scale, the scope of the issues here. But really, there's a question mark why he's not in the UK. He's not there because he's away trying to battle for Britain. But of course, you can't be everywhere at the same time as a Prime Minister.
And also, you're absolutely right to say that farmers here aren't at all happy. Of course, this was preordained. It was in the diary a long, long time ago. It's an annual event. Nevertheless, thousands of farmers are descending on London. A lot of them have already arrived. Chris Hope, I've got a farmer about to come into my studio, and his son, and they're very, very unhappy. Now, talking of the nicknames, we've got Never Hear Keir. They're now calling him Keir Starmer, the farmer harmer, back here. They feel that these policies are ripping the heart out of rural communities, and they just feel that the Prime Minister should be in the country to face the music.
Yeah, and we refer to Sir Keir Starmer. The march organised by the NFU was organised since the budget, and of course the G20 has been on the agenda internationally for nearly a year. It was always likely that Sir Keir Starmer would come here, but yeah, there's no question. I think there's a disconnect between the two parties, isn't there? Because the government says only 1 in 4 farms are affected by this 20% inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million. For the NFU, they say the numbers are nowhere near what they believe in. And bring those two numbers together, work out what is the correct impact here, I think, is part of the conversation the NFU should have with the government. And also, is it fair that farmers over the age of 80, for example, who have no time really to plan their estate management, to hand over their properties 7 years before they die, maybe, because they're so old, are they being unfairly affected? So around the edges, there could be some movement, but no question, this is a battle with farmers. And we've heard on GBNews already last week how some farmers are looking at hanging their farmers' shirts from the gates of Parliament to show this government is taking the shirts from its backs. I think the passion has gone nowhere. I think at the weekend we saw a minister saying that farmers should calm down and look at the small print. Well, anyone with children like I do in their teens or early 20s saying calm down is often the reverse effect, Martin.
OK, Chris, thank you very much there. Live from a beautifully sunny Rio de Janeiro. Not at all jealous that I'm in a drizzly Westminster. Speak to you later on in the show. Look at that wonderful vista. Thank you very much to you there, Chris. Now, let's get more reaction on the story about Ukraine now from our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So Ukraine, once again, overshadowing the G20, as it did COP, as it did every major conversation that Sir Keir Starmer has attempted to have with the European Union. This latest twist is coming rather late in Joe Biden's presidency. It begs the question, is this the principled thing to do, a provocative thing to do, or is it a political thing that he's done here today?
Well, if you're sitting in the Kremlin, you'll say that it's a provocative thing to do. Having said that, of course, Vladimir Putin and fellow ministers and indeed the media in Russia have at various points over the now almost 3 years since they invaded Ukraine spoken about red lines and how the UK and the US and other allies providing certain armaments and weapons systems to Ukraine would be a very provocative threat and a move that could potentially bring about World War III. We heard them mention the same type of threat when the UK and others spoke about giving tanks to Ukraine. Eventually, it was the UK that pushed ahead with that under Boris Johnson and got tanks into Ukraine. And then, of course, the same argument was had over fast jets, the providing of the likes of F-16 fast jets. Again, the UK took the lead on that and started training some of those Ukrainian pilots for fast jet operations. Now those jets are going into Ukraine as well. We didn't get the threatened retaliation from Russia after those decisions were taken. And now, of course, for many months, we've had the same threats from Russia about the use of these longer range missiles. You're looking at one on the screen there, the Storm Shadow missile. That is a UK missile. We have yet to get word from the UK government that, given the announcement from Joe Biden that the ATACMS system, which is the US equivalent to that long-range missile, can now be used further into Russia. Whether the UK will follow suit, it would seem strange if the UK didn't, given that the UK, with so much of the former systems I've been talking about, took a lead role in trying to persuade the Americans to give the Ukrainians permission to fire deeper into Russia.
Thank you very much. An excellent summary as ever there. Mark White, GBNews' Home and Security Editor. Now, to continue this conversation, I'm delighted to I'm joined in the studio by the former senior lecturer at Sandhurst, Andrew Fox. In fact, Andrew, you're much more than a former senior lecturer. You're a former paratrooper, correct?
Correct,
You've served several tours of duty in the Middle East and some advising special forces, right? So you know about battle on the ground. You know about the realities of war, not just the politics of war. Can I get your take on why this has come so late? Is there enough time for this to make any difference?
It really depends on what Mr. Trump does in January when he gets into power. We've had 2 to 3 years now of opportunity to give Ukraine the arms and the weapons that they need to make a real impact on the battlefield in Ukraine, and we have not. So what we've essentially done is kept them in neutral mode, where they've got enough ammunition and arms to keep a stalemate, but not enough to make a breakthrough. And whether they've now got the ability to make a breakthrough in less than 2 months, I think is slightly unlikely.
Is it the right thing to do? Is it the principled thing to do? For a long time, Vladimir Putin and many before him have always said any act of any Western nation or any Western nation assisting any other borderline nation of firing into Russia would be seen as an act of provocation, as an act of war. But, you know, Putin did invade Ukraine. Politically, diplomatically, is it the right thing for Ukraine and the West to have done?
It would have been the right thing 2 years ago. You know, I fully supported Ukraine throughout this conflict. I think that they've been invaded illegally. And Mr. Putin is asking for the ability to fire thousands of drones and missiles from Russia into Ukraine, whilst demanding that Ukraine has not the right to respond. And so 2 years ago, this would have been a great asset. If we know the war is likely to come to a conclusion sometime in January when Mr. Trump takes over, this feels like a fairly politically cowardly move by Mr. Biden. Essentially trying to take advantage of his last 2 months in the presidency to score political points rather than actually trying to help the Ukrainians win the war.
And why do you think he's done that? Is that so that... I mean, he always wanted a legacy. Legacy politics, trying to end the war in Ukraine is something he's always been very, very big on, very passionate about. But now will this force Donald Trump into the position of being what he's always said, a Putin appeaser?
No, I think it gives Ukraine a fighting chance in spite of whatever Mr. Trump does. So we know that President Macron and Mr. Starmer have promised to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. If Mr. Biden can accelerate the aid package to Ukraine and give them what they need in the immediate short term, that potentially buys the time for European and other NATO leaders to replace the stuff that America will no longer be giving after Mr. Trump fights on. So I'd imagine that is the strategic long play. Whether it works or not and whether or not we can afford that, I think, is yet to be seen.
Do you think that such rhetoric of I can end the war in 24 hours, I can end the war in a week, is that like... I mean, just yesterday, Zelensky said that the war is likely to end sooner under Donald Trump, and then the next day, missiles are being fired into Russia from within the Ukraine. Does this latest move complicate or extrapolate or delay the ending of this conflict?
As I said, it's about giving Ukraine a fighting chance and perhaps buying other countries time to replace aid that America will no longer be giving under Mr. Trump. The war may end tomorrow, but what that means is essentially a Putin victory. He gets to keep the parts of Ukraine that he's illegally seized, that he's ethnically cleansed, where he's committed war crime after war crime, and he's rewarded for that with the cessation of this war as it is. And on top of that, we're then storing up problems further down the line with a toxic and Russian regime that is prepared to reach out into other countries and interfere and potentially even stoke further conflict. So I don't support ending the war. I support giving Ukraine what they need to actually drive the Russians off the battlefield.
Andrew Fox, always an absolute pleasure to have you in the studio. Thank you very, very much for your expertise. Now, next, I'll be joined by farmer Clive Bailey and his wonderful 12-year-old boy, Henry, who desperately wants to plough the same furrow as his dad. But he's feeling somewhat dejected, in fact, heartbroken that it might not be possible under the Labour government. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadland.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history. Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Thousands of farmers are set to descend on Westminster here this week, rallying against Labour's controversial plans to impose an inheritance tax on their farms. And joining me now in the studio is the farmer Clive Bailey and his 12-year-old boy Henry. Now, Clive's granddad started their farm in Staffordshire, is that right, after World War II? And let's have a quick chat with you, you wonderful pair. We've had you on the show before down the line. Pleasure to meet you in person, and your wonderful lad. Tell us about your farm, how you got going, what it means to you, and then moving into, I know you came out with a line that really touched me, and that was, this feels like a closing of the mines moment approaching farming. That really resonated with me as a coal miner's son. Enough about me. Tell us about your farm and the position you find yourself in.
OK, well, thanks for inviting us in for a start, thanks. Well, yeah, as you just said, my grandfather started the farm. He's the first generation. I'm a third-generation farmer from, we farm in Staffordshire, combinable crops, so wheat, barley, beans, that kind of thing. My grandfather started the farm, 8 acres, a tenant, just after the end of World War II. Food security, obviously, people still under rationing, it was important there. And I've just been sat in your green room watching a headline about, could this be the start of World War III, and finding it utterly unbelievable that our politicians seem to think they can import all our food and we can be reliant on imports. That's just not smart, is it, really?
And on the screen now, that's your dad, right? Tell us
that's my grandfather. That's grandfather, yeah. So that's probably taken back in the, I'd guess, like kind of mid-70s. Beautiful. His cow. So he was a dairy farmer. It was a dairy farm that I grew up on. My father continued that dairy farm. Foot and mouth, that was the end of that, really, with the end of the dairy farm. And so I came back from university and took it more of a combinable crops route, kind of arable farm. We've expanded the acreage. And, next generation, Henry, I've got another son, William, who's at school today. But, these guys might not get the opportunity I got or my father got.
So you've ploughed on, poled on the pern. You've, against all the odds, the headwinds of, the margins we hear so much about from the big retailers screwing you to the floor, the increased costs of transportation, of fertiliser, of everything.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
All the cost base has gone through the roof. The profit margin has been squeezed down, and yet farmers like yourself carry on because of the legacy, because of the ability to pass it on. So recently that's been really brought into focus, and that's been, I know, very, very troubling for you.
Yeah, well, as you say, this is like the straw that broke the camel's back, really. It's the margins are they're embarrassingly low for agriculture. So although we have a lot of capital tied up in what we need to be able to farm, kind of tractors £250,000, combine harvesters £500,000 piece of equipment. This is before you start talking about land and the buildings and the cattle for livestock farmers and whatever. Our returns on that investment can be like 0.5% or less. So you could have a farm that has what sounds like a ridiculous amount of money, £10 million worth of assets, but they're not money to that farmer. They're acres, they're cows, they're crops in the field, they're tractors. They're these tools, like, for instance, a mechanic or a carpenter. This is a tax that's impossible to pay, because it's like asking that mechanic, sell your spanners, you can pay your tax bill. But if you do that, he's not a mechanic anymore, is he? So we're not making, no one's farming right now for income, for that high income. You're talking, if you're doing well at 0.5%, a £5 million farm could have that kind of, could be the farmer doing that. He will probably not even be earning the national minimum wage. So.
And this is your farm here. This is some of your kit on the screen there, is it? That looks like mega expensive machine. Let's get that on the screen again. What we got? Let's talk through some of this kit.
Yeah. It's horribly expensive stuff, quite frankly. So combine harvester, something like that. That's well north of £500,000. 750,000 you can get to on a combine now. A grain trailer, £30,000, £40,000. The tractor on the front, £250,000. That sea drill, I think about £180,000 now, something like that.
So that's £1 million worth of kit, right
just there. And that's not all we've got, you know, obviously to farm, and we're not a huge acreage, you know, so that's what you need to be able to do it, you know. That's just the investment needed. I mean, if we went into Dragon's Den saying, look, I've got a great idea, invest £10 million here and I'll make you like, you know, £40,000, £50,000 a year, I think they'd laugh you out the room, wouldn't they? It makes no sense purely from that point of view. But what we have always had, and what my grandfather had, you know, when he died, he had that kind of, still had that kind of idea that, well, what he had done was going to pass to his son, my son, and I guess Henry wasn't born then, but, you know, it always had that. That's the other reason, really. It's multi-generational. Farming makes no sense a single generation at a time.
Let's bring you in, Henry. You've sat there very patiently. I had a wonderful chat with you earlier on in the green room, and you dream of being a farmer, just like your dad and generations before, right? That's what you want to do. What is it about it that you're drawn to?
It's just like the whole environment aspect, and also I really enjoy like harvest time. It's a really exciting time of the year, and I look forward to when I can one day hopefully run harvest time on my dad's farm.
And who wouldn't want to follow in their father's footsteps like that? How does it make you feel, Henry, when you hear your dad, you know, being so concerned about the future, not only of your farm, but of British farming? Like you aspire to follow in your father's footsteps, and now politicians could take that away from you. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel like disappointed in the government, because they're taking away something that me and I'm guessing all of my generation of farms, opportunities to become farmers when they're like older. So it just makes me feel disappointed, really, that I can't get that opportunity.
And we know that the government, Downing Street, watch this show. And I often like to ask our guests when they come in, you know, would you like to give a message to the Prime Minister? What would you say to Sir Keir Starmer if he was watching the show today?
I'd say just think about how this affects my generation of farmers and how it affects their futures of doing something that they've dreamed about for years.
And the final word to Dad. How does it make you feel, like, sort of, because I know, like, you got very emotional about this, and understandably so. It's like 3 generations, and you said, I feel like we're at the end of the line. I remember reading that and just feeling heartbroken for you. Yeah. And now hearing your boy said, well, I want to carry on.
It is.
You're going to fight, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, tomorrow, I think, I mean, they've been wheeling out this figure that there's only like 500 farmers affected a year. Well, I think they're going to probably see a very different number to that tomorrow. So maybe that might start to bring the message home. And tomorrow is all about, we're not trying to be disruptive. We don't want to kind of cause problems. We feel we've got public support right now, and we want to kind of keep it friendly like that. But you know, a lot of people are asking me what happens next, where does this go? Farmers aren't going to give up with this, and I think if they just dig their heels in and they don't come to the table with us and start to look at, actually, you know, what's really behind those numbers, and actually what they want to achieve. I get what they're trying to do here. We need more tax, we need better services, we need better NHS, but this isn't the right way to do it. Destroying the family farm is not the solution to their problem.
Thank you. Now, a quick statement here, because GB News put these concerns to the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, early today, and here's what she had to say.
I respect the right of anyone within our country to demonstrate, to protest. It's an important principle, a long-standing principle of our democracy. I think it's something that people fought hard for, and it's right that we maintain it. So I respect their right to do that. What I would say, however, is that the changes that we're setting out will not affect the vast majority of farms or farmers, and we're talking about those often the wealthiest within our society. So these are tough decisions in the context of a budget where we do have to fix the foundations of our economy, where we want to make sure we can invest in our public services, but that did involve some difficult considerations for the Chancellor.
Superb. Now, lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. Before that, let's shake both of your hands.
Thank you, Mike.
Clive,
Thanks.
young Henry, good lad, and best of luck with everything tomorrow.
Thank you.
Now, coming up, Labour is apparently ready to pay governments in Vietnam and Turkey to help stop the flow of illegal migrants to Britain. But is this a patch on the original Rwanda plan? But first, here's your headlines, and it's Sophie Reaper.
A very good afternoon to you. Let's take a look at your latest headlines. Sir Keir Starmer says a strong UK-China relationship is important for both of our countries as he met Chinese President Xi Jinping on the fringes of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir also suggested a full UK-China meeting in London or Beijing as part of his desire for what he called consistent, durable, respectful ties between the two countries. Sir Keir Starmer became the first PM to meet the Chinese president since 2018. With world leaders attending the G20 summit in Brazil, the PM has also said Ukraine is top of his agenda. President Vladimir Putin has warned the West they would be throwing fuel on the fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied cruise and ballistic missiles at Russia. This decision from Biden seems to have been prompted by a move from North Korea, in which they've sent thousands of troops to fight with Russia. Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge says the move from the US president is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand from the US State Department they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances this decision is justified.
And as temperatures plummet, the Met Office says the UK is braced for disruptive snow, ice and cold temperatures over the coming days. Up to 20 centimetres of snow may accumulate in the worst affected areas in what's being described by the Met Office as the country's first taste of winter. Today, snow and frost have been recorded across parts of the Yorkshire Dales, as well as in certain areas of Scotland, including at the Cogarth viewpoint in Aberdeenshire. That's as an amber warning comes into force at 7 p.m. this evening, covering the east and north of England, the Midlands and Yorkshire and the Humber, with yellow alerts also coming into place for the south east, south west and London at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, all lasting until 6 p.m. this Saturday. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. For now, I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next half an hour.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
But first, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2625 and €1.1948 euros. The price of gold is £2,063.63 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,065.34 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report. For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's some pretty cold weather across parts of the UK at the moment, and with that there's the risk of some disruptive snow as we go through the next 24 hours because a frontal system is going to push in and bump into the cold air currently across many northern parts, leading to the rain turning to snow. Already as we go through the end of the afternoon, some snow over higher ground of Northern Ireland, but it's across parts of northern England where we're likely to see the greatest disruption from the snow, potentially 20 centimetres of lying snow above some higher ground, even a little bit to lower levels potentially. Further north, some wintry showers for northern Scotland, some clearer skies across other parts of Scotland, leading to a harsh frost here, temperatures perhaps falling as low as -8, but it's a milder, albeit cloudier and perhaps damp story further south. As we go through tomorrow morning then, those wintry showers could bring a bit of sleet, bit of snow, also some icy patches, so some difficult conditions first thing. A drier story though across more central and southern parts of Scotland. And by the morning, most of the wet and wintry weather will have cleared through Northern Ireland, and it will be clearing away from parts of northern England too. Further south, it's a milder start to the day. There will be some outbreaks of rain, but again, most of that will be clearing away towards the east as we go through the morning. A lot of dry weather then following in behind behind, and things should turn a bit sunnier as well for many places, especially towards the north. But towards the southwest here, there will be some outbreaks of rain around, and some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. We will see our temperatures actually dropping for some places as we go through the day. A real chilly feel to things, and with some brisk winds coming in from the north, it is going to feel particularly cold indeed. We stick with that northerly wind as we go through the end of the day, so still some wintry showers, particularly across northern parts of Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland too, and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind. And that's the theme as we go through the rest of the week, really. A cold feel with some wintry showers at times. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Stop-start for the M90 southbound in Edinburgh at junction 1A Kirkliston. We're seeing queuing traffic in West Yorkshire on the A1 into the roadworks at Wentbridge. Estimated travel time there around 10 minutes. The usual slow traffic for the M5 northbound in the West Midlands to join the M6 at junction 8. Queues in Cambridgeshire. The A1M southbound has 3 lanes closed for an accident involving 2 lorries just before junction 14 Alconbury. Queues in Norfolk on the A11 Thetford bypass northbound. It's all due to a broken down vehicle at the Munford Road roundabout. Slow for the M25 clockwise in Hertfordshire. There's a lane closed on the exit slip road at junction 23 South Mims for a broken down lorry, and slow on the A31 westbound in Hampshire between Stony Cross and Picket Post. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 4 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. The Prime Minister has hinted that the UK could start paying countries in efforts to stop migrants entering the UK illegally. It's expected the government will announce an Italian-style immigration deal with countries including Kurdistan and Vietnam. But will these schemes work? That's the big question I'm about to ask to the immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal. Harjap, welcome to the show. It's been way too long, my friend. So here we go. We're doing a deal where we're paying a nation to take people back. We tried this with France. That didn't work. We did a deal with Albania. That half worked because there was a returns agreement in place. From what you've seen of these deals so far, are they going to be effective?
Well, essentially, these deals are wrapped up. But when you take the wrapping off, they are returns agreements. And that's something that should have been signed in 2016 when we exited the EU. But in all our wisdom of the last government, they didn't do that. And as a result, we've been unable to send people back. If we look at returns this year, they're up under Labour. So there are nearly 10,000 returns since Labour took over, as a roughly about a 17% increase. A 19% increase in the number compared to last year, and a 14% increase in foreign offenders that are jailed, going up as well. So Labour is walking the walk in comparison to last year and compared to the last 14 years' records. Italy has done similar deals with Libya and Tunisia, and it's working for them. So there's been a lot of conversation between Keir Starmer and the Italians, and he's been looking at that, and we know that he's saying, look, I want to follow that. But the overall verdict from Keir Starmer and the overall policy is going to be he's willing to try anything and everything to bring it down. That includes stopping the migrants at source, offering countries incentives for them not to come, investing in the countries where they're coming from, and investing in intelligence and drones to prevent them coming, and catching people smugglers, something which recently they've done in this, catching this guy who's been supplying all the dinghies in relation to that. So something is happening rather than nothing, as opposed to the talk and the Rwanda plan. And this is different from the Rwanda plan. We know that only 4 people volunteered for that, and £500 million spent on that, and they were offering all sorts of incentives, yet it was sort of doomed to fail. But this, let's see, the proof will be in the pudding. But if we look at the figures now, they're definitely backing up what Sir Keir's saying. So the figures are playing out for him.
As you brought up Rwanda, let's talk about the fact Donald Trump has announced today, Rwanda, that's a good idea. I'm going to send some of my illegal immigrants to Rwanda. In fact, more than that, probably the precise same hotels and the same units that have been paid for by British taxpayers. Of course, the big difference being there won't be any lawyers that can stop that happening in America, because guess what? America is not the European Court of Human Rights, and Donald Trump will override something like the United Nations Anyway, don't you think there's a bitter irony in the fact that Rwanda was turned down by the UK, it was rejected by the ECHR, it was constantly kiboshed by human rights lawyers. Now Donald Trump's going to sweep in, pick up the pieces and use the precise same template.
Well, we've heard Donald Trump talk about this before, and his wall that was supposed to stop people, that didn't work. Remember, America's got a big problem, much bigger than what we have in numbers-wise. 15 million allegedly undocumented migrants. That's 15 million migrants there. Now, if you're going to send 15 million people to Rwanda, good luck with that. We'll see what actually happens with that. So what would have been much more effective for him would have been to do deals with South American countries and neighboring countries. Sending people to Rwanda, what he's just done is hijacked the groundwork that Boris has done and sort of taken over that and saved himself $500 million in respect of that. But the numbers, there's numbers are not there. There's not, forget 15 million. There's not even numbers there for 10,000 people. There's not even numbers there for, 5,000 people. So the places just aren't there unless you're going to really offer massive amounts of money to the Rwandan government, who are probably hands folded and licking their lips at the sort of prospect of that.
But it's a deterrent, isn't it? And it's a deterrent that could well work. For example, he's also said to Mexico, if you don't control your side of the border when I'm president, I'm going to slap 20% tariffs on every single thing you import into exports to the USA. And America is Mexico's biggest trading partner. That kind of stuff is most likely to work because there's a deterrent to the Mexican forces to make sure it does work. Meanwhile, the point of entry for illegal immigrants to Britain is France. Instead of threatening France or imposing some tariffs on France, meanwhile, we give them £500 million a year, and the numbers are going up.
Well, the fact is, the financial deterrent is definitely a much more bigger thing, and that sort of Mexico will have to think, well, hold on, we're going to have to do something here, otherwise they're going to hit us where it hurts. You'll find that when you hit someone for money, it's a great motivating factor, especially for governments and businesses. So I think that is probably much more better and effective than doing a wall as such. The problem we have with Europe is that other European countries already take on massive numbers in migrants, whereas the South American countries, although they take it on, but they do pass it on as well to America. Now, so there is no incentive in such for European countries to say, well, hold on, let's stop them at source. So for Austria, where potentially everyone could be stopped, there's no incentive for there. The whole asylum system will collapse. The whole migration system would collapse. So this has to be done with full European cooperation. And this is why Keir Starmer has been around Europe, and he's looking at other countries as well, and he's talking the talk, and he realizes, look, I can't do this on my own. We can't do this as an island. We can't do this as Fortress Britain. We've tried to do that. It's failed. But the working with the Europeans on this might just achieve what he wants to achieve. And I think, well, like I said, I'm sure, Martin, in a couple of months' time, we'll be talking about figures, how many going up. But 50,000 people, remember, coming in, or 30,000 coming in, might not be a problem if you're sending 30,000 out. What was happening before is 30,000 people were coming in, and the Conservatives were sending out 2,000. 3,000 a year, and that returns figure dropped so badly. As we talk, Labour are recruiting ahead for the National Returns Unit, which is a new unit that is set up, invested 40 million, which is dedicated, a special unit just to sending people back. Applications for that close at the end of the month. So Labour are getting down to business. Let's see, like I said, next month, I'm sure we'll have something else to talk about, Martin, like we do.
Well, look forward to that. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you very, very much for joining us today on GB News immigration lawyer, great friend of the show, Harjap Singh Bungal. Thank you very much. Now, it's time now for our poll of the day. And today we are asking, do you think Donald Trump is right to adopt Britain's ditched Rwanda plan? The final result will be announced later on in my show, around about 5 p.m. Now, for all of our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/polls. Now, masked burglars have stolen farm vehicles from the Windsor Castle estate, while members of the royal family are believed to have been asleep nearby. We'll bring you all the latest. That's coming next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Patrick Christys tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
We all know that pensioners will freeze to death this winter because of the cruel cut to the winter fuel payment, rising council tax, the energy price cap going up, all of that. Now, instead of looking after them, we appear to have a government that seems to want to make their lives worse. Now, they might not care, but you do. And thanks to you, I have now raised more than £270,000 for Friends of the Elderly. You have raised more than the entire amount they gave away in grants for the most desperate pensioners last year. So amazing effort. Thank you very much. Now, I said I'd do a freezing cold swim to raise awareness for how cold some pensioners will be in their own homes this winter. And on Saturday, I went to Stickle Tarn in the Lake District. I'd like to give a massive thank you to the people who turned up to meet me along the way. I would also like to give a monumental shout-out to the wonderful camera crew. We've got John Clark and Joe Scowen, and our health and safety maestro, known only as The Stag. I come up with these crackpot ideas, but it is down to those wonderful people to make them actually happen. I would also like to give you a little warning. There are aspects of this footage that you will not be able to unsee. I am aware that at times my body resembles a bag of milk. But you know what? If me embarrassing myself helps to raise a bit more money, then so be it. And you can go to justgiving.com/page/Save Our Seniors now to donate.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 9 minutes to 4 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Masked men attempted to raid Windsor Castle's grounds as reports suggest that Prince William, Princess Catherine and their children were asleep nearby. The two men are understood to have scaled a 6-foot fence at night to steal farm vehicles. And GB News' Raw correspondent Cameron Walker joins us now. Cameron, a dramatic heist. Tell us more.
Yeah, it certainly was, Martin. This happened on a Sunday night at about 11:45 p.m. on the 13th of October. The reason it's believed that the Prince and Princess of Wales and their 3 children were very nearby when this incident took place is because it was a school night, and Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis would have been preparing to go to school the next week. So what we know is that 2 masked men scaled the 6-foot perimeter wall here at Windsor Castle. Their target was a farm on the estate, and they stole 2 farming vehicles. One was a red quad bike, the other was a pickup truck, and police were only alerted to the fact that these 2 men had scaled the wall when they smashed through the gates, one of the back gates here at Windsor Castle, to make their escape with those 2 vehicles. So perhaps slightly embarrassing for the security services that was the only that was why they had only just found out about the incident. The Sun on Sunday reporting that armed police, the 24/7 armed police on King Henry VIII Gate here at Windsor Castle, and indeed the back gates where those 2 thieves took off with the vehicles, had ceased. So they're only there for certain occasions now. Now, police are not going into any security details, nor is Buckingham Palace or indeed Kensington Palace, but it does raise a wider issue about how the royal family is protected here at Windsor Castle, because just in February, just outside the King's apartments, another man who was unarmed was arrested for trespass. He's been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. And then in December 2021, on Christmas Day, an armed man with a crossbow was confronted by police, and he told the police he was here to kill the Queen. Now, he, of course, has subsequently been sentenced for treason, but it does raise that wider point, the third incident in just 3 years, Martin.
And Cameron, as you're here, we've got a quick minute. I've heard that Queen Camilla's had some rough news.
Yeah, some very sad news from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. The Queen has announced the death of her beloved dog, Beth, who was a Jack Russell, who was adopted from Battersea Dogs and Cats home. And she adopted two of them together, actually, Beth and Bluebell. So the Queen only has one dog. The dog had an inoperable tumour and had to be put down, very sadly, this weekend. So it's understood the Queen has been left heartbroken by this sad news. The royal family posting on social media this afternoon a number of photographs of Beth with the Queen and indeed the King as well. I think perhaps she was very much a loved pet by both the King and the Queen. So very sad news this afternoon for them.
Beautiful dog. Thank you very much, Cameron Walker, for joining us there from Windsor Castle. Thank you. Now, thousands of angry farmers are set to descend on Westminster tomorrow. I'll be joined by the leader of the rebel Pro-Farmers United, who says we will not be told by somebody from the city to calm down. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now, here's your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's some pretty cold weather across parts of the UK at the moment, and with that, there's the risk of some disruptive snow as we go through the next 24 hours because a frontal system is going to push in and bump into the cold air currently across many northern parts, leading to the rain turning to snow. Already as we go through the end of the afternoon, some snow over higher ground of Northern Ireland, but it's across parts of northern England where we're likely to see the greatest disruption from the snow, potentially 20 centimetres of lying snow above some higher ground, even a little bit to lower levels potentially. Further north, some wintry showers for northern Scotland, some clearer skies across other parts of Scotland, leading to a harsh frost here, temperatures perhaps falling as low as -8, but it's a milder, albeit cloudier and perhaps damp story further south. As we go through tomorrow morning then, those wintry showers could bring a bit of sleet, bit of snow, also some icy patches, so some difficult conditions first thing. A drier story though across more central and southern parts of Scotland, and by the morning most of the wet and wintry weather will have cleared through Northern Ireland and it will be clearing away from parts of northern England too. Further south it's a milder start to the day. There will be some outbreaks of rain, but again most of that will be clearing away towards the east as we go through the morning. A lot of dry weather then following in behind, and things should turn a bit sunnier as well for many places, especially towards the north. But towards the southwest here, there will be some outbreaks of rain around, and some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. We will see our temperatures actually dropping for some places as we go through the day. A real chilly feel to things, and with some brisk winds coming in from the north, it is going to feel particularly cold indeed. We stick with that northerly wind as we go through the end of the day, so still some wintry showers, particularly across northern parts of Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland too, and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind. And that's the theme as we go through the rest of the week, really. A cold feel with some wintry showers at times. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M6 southbound in the West Midlands. 3 lanes closed there for an accident at junction 10 for Wolverhampton. Also in the West Midlands, we've got the usual slow traffic for the M5 northbound to join the M6 at junction 8. Estimated travel time currently around 15 minutes. Queues on the M4 eastbound towards London in Berkshire. There's a lane closed for an accident between junction 6 for Slough and 5 for Langley. Stop-start for the M25 into the roadworks anti-clockwise just before junction 10, the Wisley interchange. Queuing traffic in Cambridgeshire. Long delays on the A1M southbound. 3 lanes closed for an accident involving 2 lorries just before junction 14 Alconbury. And slow for the A1 in South Mims. It's partially blocked due to an accident at junction 1 of the M25. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2 or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and a happy Monday to you. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, in one of his final acts as US President, Joe Biden has given permission to Ukraine to launch missiles into Russia. The Kremlin and Donald Trump's top team have accused Biden of pouring oil on the fires of World War III. Was it provocative or was it the principled thing to do? And Jet Set Starmer's global tour continues with the G20 summit seeing the Prime Minister chalk up his 10th foreign trip in just 2 months. We've had 2-tier Keir and free gear Keir. Now it's never here, Keir. Is it right for the Starmer to be living La Vida Loca while furious farmers are rallying back here in Blighty? We'll ask our man in Brazil, Chris Hope, our political editor. And tomorrow, thousands of angry farmers are set to descend on Westminster to protest against Prime Minister that they are now calling Keir Starmer the farmer harmer. On today's show, I'll be joined by the leader of the rebel Pro-Farmers United Union who says we will not be told by somebody from the city to calm down. And a British TikToker has sparked outrage by declaring, let's make Christmas Palestinian. With Christmas carols, school nativity plays, Xmas markets and even pantos increasingly having references to Christmas airbrushed out or even removed altogether to appease a vocal minority. Are we in danger of seeing Christmas cancelled this year? That's all coming in your next hour. Well, the show is a pleasure to have your company. Have you noticed that Christmas seems to be disappearing this year? Here's some pictures that GB News took at the weekend. These are the streets of London, normally festooned with Merry Christmas, messages such as that. Now, look, let's celebrate the holidays. It celebrates, but celebrates what? It doesn't even say. It's the holiday magic at my daughter's school. It's now a festival of winter. It's not a festival of winter, it's Christmas. Happy holidays. What about Merry Christmas? It's Christmas being removed, well, from Christmas. Pantomimes, carol services, nativity plays increasingly seemingly become a thing of the past, removing Christmas references from them and oftentimes people's being taken out of them if they don't agree with the Christmas message in case it offends a vocal minority of others. But what about, can you imagine the hoo-ha if you took your children or anybody's children out of Eid celebrations or say, I don't want to celebrate Black History Month this year? There'd be an absolute stink. And yet, It seems, to me at least, there's a bit of a war on Christmas. Do you agree? Get in touch, gbnews.com/Your Say. But now it's your headlines, and here's Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. The time is just after 4 o'clock. Let's take a look at your latest headlines. Sir Keir Starmer says a strong UK-China relationship is important for both of our countries as he met Chinese President Xi Jinping on the fringes of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir also suggested a full UK-China meeting in London or Beijing as part of his desire for what he called consistent, durable, respectful ties between the two countries. Sir Keir Starmer became the first Prime Minister to meet the Chinese president since 2018. With world leaders attending the G20 summit in Brazil, the PM has also said Ukraine is top of his agenda. Sir Keir says we need to double down on support for Ukraine as President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. President Vladimir Putin warned the West they would be throwing fuel on the fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied missiles at Russia. This decision from Biden seems to have been prompted by a move from North Korea, in which they've sent thousands of troops to fight with Russia. Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge says the move from the US president is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, a wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand from the US State Department they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances this decision is justified.
Elsewhere in politics, Sir Keir Starmer says he's absolutely confident that the vast majority of farms and farmers will not be affected by changes to inheritance tax announced in the budget. The row over the taxes for farms worth more than £1 million continues as the PM said last night that the money the government has put into the sector is, quote, not to be overlooked. A protest is expected in Westminster tomorrow as farmers rally on Whitehall against the changes announced in last month's budget, while separately the National Farmers Union will hold a mass lobby of MPs in their efforts to get the government to rethink. Earlier, the son of a British farmer told this programme how the changes could impact his dream of becoming a farmer.
It makes me feel like disappointed in the government because they're taking away something that me and I'm guessing all of my generation of farms opportunities to become farmers when they're older. I'd say just think about how this affects my generation of farmers and how it affects their future of doing something that they've dreamed about for years.
In other news, burglars raided the Windsor Castle estate while the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children reportedly slept nearby, although the King and Queen were not in residence. The Sun has reported that 2 men are said to have climbed a 6-foot fence at night and stolen farm vehicles during the raid last month. They used a stolen truck to break through a gate said to be the nearest exit for the Prince and Princess and their children before targeting Shaw Farm, a working farm inside the estate. The pair remain at large. And finally, the Met Office says the UK is braced for disruptive snow, ice and cold temperatures over the coming days. Up to 20 centimetres of snow may accumulate in the worst affected areas in what's being described by the Met Office as the country's first taste of winter. Today, snow and frost have been recorded across parts of the Yorkshire Dales, as well as in certain areas of Scotland, including at the Cloggarth viewpoint in Aberdeenshire. That's as an amber warning comes into force at 7 p.m. this evening, covering the east and north of England, the Midlands and Yorkshire and the Humber, with yellow alerts also coming into place for the south east, south west and London as of 8 a.m. tomorrow, all lasting until 6 p.m. on Saturday. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophie. Now, are we on the brink of World War III again? Well, Joe Biden has given approval for Ukraine to strike targets within Russia with US-supplied long-range missiles for the first time. And all eyes now turn to our Prime Minister to see whether he will follow suit and allow British Storm Shadow missiles to be used in a similar fashion. And let's discuss this further now with GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White, who joins us on the show. Mark, welcome to the show. So, the many supporters of Ukraine saying this is the principled thing to do. It should have happened before now. The Kremlin are saying it's an act of provocation, pouring oil on the fires of World War III. In fact, many from Donald Trump's top team echoing that, and others saying this is pure politics. Joe Biden and the dying embers of his presidency leaving a difficult inheritance for Donald Trump. What's the latest?
Yeah, you can make strong arguments for all of the above. I think from the point of view of the Ukrainians, there's been some deep frustration over the almost 3 years since Russia invaded that country, because at every step of the way, they've asked for new munitions, new systems, and have had to wait many, many months when the Western powers supplying those weapons systems have prevaricated over whether or not Ukraine should have them, and eventually have provided them. But as I say, very belatedly. If we think back, originally it was arguments over heavy weapons systems, artillery systems. Then it was tanks, and Britain led the way there with putting Challenger 2 tanks into Ukraine, which then allowed for other allies to grow a bit of a backbone and do the same. And that was the same, of course, with the fighter jet issue, the fast jets, with Britain saying that they would train Ukrainian fighter jet pilots in this country and provide facilities elsewhere for their training as well. Now we see, of course, that Ukraine is being given fast jets by a number of their supporting countries, but it's all taken a very long time, and the real feeling that there has been throughout this war in Ukraine is that they've been given just enough to be able to keep Russia at bay, but never enough actually to make meaningful inroads and to push Russia back out of the country it's invaded.
But Mark White, there are just 11 weeks left now of Joe Biden's presidency, and almost certainly, we've heard all along, the mood music from Donald Trump's camp is to try and bring as swift a resolution as possible to this. In fact, even just yesterday, Volodymyr Zelensky was saying he felt that the war would end sooner with a Trump presidency. Is this latest move to allow the firing of missiles into Russian territory going to delay matters, or do you think it's a blip in the road and those talks will commence, beg your pardon, when Donald Trump gets into the White House?
I think President Trump will do what he wants to do at the end of the day, and whatever Joe Biden has announced now and set in play, yes, it can be in operation for a couple of months, maybe longer, depending on the stocks that they have. But ultimately, it's the new man in the White House who is going to determine the course of this war. And that is a big deciding factor, really, for Ukraine's ability to continue to take the fight to Russia. If Donald Trump decides that he's pulling the plug on the funding, well, they are by far the biggest suppliers of aid and weapons to Ukraine, some $60 billion a year in comparison to the $10 billion or so that the UK, or I should say $60 billion they provided so far in comparison to the 10 billion or so that the UK has provided. 11 billion euros have been provided by Germany, which is the second biggest provider of support for Ukraine. I don't think there's any realistic way that the European allies in NATO could go this alone. If the US does pull out, it may limp on for some time. But if Donald Trump is determined to get both sides around the table with the threat, basically, to Ukraine that they've got to come up with an agreement or funding gets pulled, it's going to be quite difficult for Volodymyr Zelensky and his government to resist that.
Mark White, comprehensive and excellent as ever. Thank you very much for joining us. And let's continue this chat now with the former UK ambassador to Russia, Sir Tony Brenton. Sir Tony, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. So, no doubt, a very difficult tightrope act to walk in your previous job. How will this play out, would you say, with Putin? Now, Putin is basically saying this is pouring oil on the fire of World War III. He would say that, wouldn't he? What do you think will happen next? And was this the right thing for Ukraine to be empowered to do?
Let me say three things. Firstly, Biden is pretty clearly doing this in order to put Ukraine in the best position to look after itself once Biden has gone. He's strengthening as much as he can. He's worried about an upcoming Russian offensive in the Kursk province, and he's angry about the presence of North Korean troops there. Secondly, all the observers whom I talk to and whom I listen to say this is, yes, it's going to be annoying for the Russians. Yes, it's going to do some damage. Yes, it may slow them down, but it's not going to change the fundamental direction the war is moving in, which is actually the Russians are winning it slowly, but they're winning it. And the observers say that this step is not going to fundamentally alter that. The third thing I should say is that this has provoked from the Russians the angriest response that I have seen on any action that the West has taken since the beginning of the war. And it's interesting to ask why. You can claim they make lots of noise. They've made lots of noises about all the planes and all the high-speed tanks and all that your correspondent was mentioning earlier. But this time, the point they're making is that these weapons, in order to get to their targets inside Russia, will need guidance from the United States itself. So what the use of them will amount to is Americans directing missiles to kill Russians. And this is a significant uptick in the level of escalation we're seeing in this war. And the Russians will be perfectly entitled within international law to respond to it if they choose to do so. Now, all of that is a bit flesh-curdling. And actually, what's going on now is basically a prologue to the main play, which is going to be when Trump takes power. And there's all this gesturing and all that going on. My instinct is that Putin has not said a word yet in response to the decision. Will save his powder, will keep his powder dry, will say lots of angry things maybe, but will not actually take any over-the-top action until he knows what he's dealing with in Trump. So all this concerns about World War III in the next 11 weeks, I think, is exaggerated. What happens after that depends fundamentally on which way Trump decides to go.
And so Tony, that begs the big question. Why do you think Joe Biden decided to do it? There are 11 weeks of his presidency left. All of the mood music is that Donald Trump wants to end this. He wants to end the multi-billion-dollar donations to Ukraine. He doesn't want there to be foreign wars. At least that's what he said. Why do it? Is it just pure politics? Is it legacy? Is it to say, I did the right thing in the dying embers of my time? Is it to cause Donald Trump embarrassment? What's your take?
My take is that Biden is genuinely dedicated to giving Ukraine all the support that he can give them. And in the dying days of his presidency, as you say, he's got $60 billion to spend on Ukraine, and he's going to work very hard to spend it. And he's giving this extra bit of support to leave Ukraine in the strongest possible position for when he is gone and when Trump is there. Now, all of that is very creditable, actually. It shows that Biden is on the right side in this war and is intent in doing the best possible for Ukraine. But he's running out of time. The real game is going to be with Trump.
Okay, and so Tony, quickly if I could, knowing much more than I do, or many of us do, about the intricacies, the mindsets, the connectivity of the Russian mindset with the West, what do you think a solution would look like where Putin's happy and Zelensky is happy? What would peace look like? Is it possible?
Well, peace is some way off. Just getting a ceasefire would be a major first step. And I think the Russians And they did have various signals over the time, most specifically last May, last June, which we in the West, broadly speaking, ignored, to say, we will settle for ceasefire on the existing battle lines. And then there are all sorts of additional stuff, which is much more difficult. Ukraine will not join NATO, Ukraine's armed forces will be limited, and there'll be complaints about basing. But from the Russian side, there is the possibility of having a sensible talk on the basis of a ceasefire on the existing battle lines and discussing all the hard stuff, territory and so on afterwards. From the Ukrainian side, it is harder because the set of Ukrainian demands for an end to the war, which are they get all their territory back, there are war crimes trials, there are reparations, all of that, amount to a demand for total Russian surrender, which the Russians, even if that demand is justified, are not going to concede. So the real issue for Trump is going to be, first of all, he doesn't want to lose Ukraine. He doesn't want to be the man who threw Ukraine into Soviet captivity. On the other hand, he has to get the Ukrainians talking on a much more rational basis than they've been willing to do so far.
OK, excellent stuff and one to watch. Thank you very much. That's the former UK ambassador to Russia, Sir Tony Branton. Fascinating insight. Thanks for joining us on GB News. Now then, how would you like to win your entire Christmas this year? And that's on us here at GB News, because we're giving you the chance to do precisely that with the very latest Great British Giveaway. It's a festive bumper edition. And here's all the details that you need to try and trouser it.
There's just 37 days until Christmas, and it's the final week to see how you could enjoy it on us. That's £20,025 in tax-free cash to make 2025 fantastic. £5,000 to spend on gifts for all of the family. £500 in vouchers to buy a slap-up Christmas lunch at your favourite supermarket. And finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. Plus, we're going to get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now brace yourselves, because next I'll be joined by the leader of the rebel Pro-Farmers United, who says we will not be told by somebody from the city to calm down. You'll not want to miss it. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The BBC has been branded jaw-achingly stupid, not by me, by the way, over its decision to cast black and ethnic minority actors in the historical drama of Wolf Hall. Now, is this a forward-thinking idea or nonsense? Are we rewriting history? Henry, I mean, the Tudors were real-life people. They were pretty much white.
Well, some of these shows depart so much from historical context anyway that maybe it doesn't make any difference. But I think just generally, we've got a problem in this country with portraying history in its correct sense. You can't change history. And I think it's about the motivation. If the motivation is to sort of, to make a political point, then I think it's wrong.
What I find kind of tedious about people finding this instant jaw-droppingly stupid, Jesus was portrayed by somebody who's half Slovak and half Irish. Moses was portrayed in the Exodus by an Englishman. So, same with Anne Boleyn, was portrayed by Natalie Portman, who is Jewish. So if this is the one thing that's getting people angry, then there's something deeper within that rage, because I think Hollywood's been doing that, where people...
When you say something deeper, do you think there is a hidden racism and people are complaining about this?
Well, I think for some, maybe yes. I can't speak for everybody because this news dropped today. I don't know why they are thinking that it's egregious, but there absolutely must be some underlying racism if this is the only one that you're upset about.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:24. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Well, we're talking now about the farmers' strike tomorrow, the farmers' protest tomorrow in Westminster. Thousands of farmers are expected to head to the capital to let their feelings be known. Now, one side of them is the National Farmers Union side, and they are having a meeting inside Parliament, and they are not planning to be militant. But there is another side to this story, because thousands of farmers are set to descend on Westminster this week, rallying against Labour's controversial plans to impose inheritance tax on farms. And I'm trying to get hold of the guy from the Pro Farmers United. He's the councillor, Tim Taylor. This is basically as close, I think, as we're getting to a breakaway union, a breakaway movement from within the farmers' side. Councillor Tim Taylor, leader of the Pro Farmers United, he said the following statement, so I'm hoping to get him up in a minute. He said of Sir Keir Starmer, the government needs to look out. We are not calming down, we are escalating. And we will be escalating big time. I'm keen to find out what he means by that, because none of us, of course, want any trouble on the streets of London or indeed anywhere else. And let's get him up now and talk to him directly. What does that mean? The leader of the Pro Farmers United, Councillor Tim Taylor. Tim Taylor, welcome to the show. So you're obviously not at all happy with what's going on. Tell us what's driven you to be so frustrated.
It's an accumulation of things. Unfortunately, government think they know what they're doing in a rural way of life. And unfortunately, they've got no idea what they're doing when it comes to rural ways, farming ways and food production. Absolutely no ways at all.
So tell us about Pro Farmers United and what you guys believe in, what you stand for, and how many of you are there?
We've 56 members on the WhatsApp group. We're somewhere around 4,500 members on social media at the moment. So Pro Farmers United was set up by myself as basically a lot of the industry is fed up with the NFU. They're getting no support. So I've took on the job as a new group called Pro Farmers United to fight the NFU. But because I'm a councillor, I've got sort of different ways into Parliament and give us a big loud open voice in there as well.
And Councillor Tim Taylor, what is it about the National Farmers Union's approach that has dissatisfied you?
They seem to be too quiet. They seem to do everything what the government wants instead of what their members want. And at the end of the day, it's their membership what basically the National Farmers Union, it is a union, is that there's the farmers what they should be looking after, not what the government want.
And with that in mind, the NFU, we've had Tom Bradshaw, the president of the NFU, on the show a couple of times before. He's for a much more of a diplomatic, sit-down approach, trying to be conciliatory. In Westminster, I think they're planning to meet with 100 Labour MPs to let their feelings be known. But you're not quite as, how should you put it, diplomatic as that. What kind of things have you got in store for us?
Diplomacy, I'm afraid, doesn't run in my vocabulary very often, no. We're quite direct, but we get results. You know, we've got hundreds of thousands of followers on various social media channels, following us, wishing us luck. The public are on our side, the way we seem to approach things. And yes, I do want to get into Parliament and deal with the likes of the NFU and Tom and various MPs. Let's have somebody with a big voice who's not frightened of upsetting people. Let's get the industry sorted out once and for all. We are a big industry. We're one of the best in the world, and we want to stay there.
Now, we've had lots of people come on the show saying what we don't want is for disruption, tractors blocking bridges, you know, the sort of thing we see on the continent. The police may clamp down on that, and we don't want to see any riots. But I'm sensing by your tone, Tim Taylor, that having a cup of tea and a chit-chat and a hobnob is not going to work for you.
I don't want to see too much disruption. I really don't. I want, and we must keep the public on our side at all times. And unfortunately, it's a lot of the public who don't understand the farming industry, but they hear what the NFU say, they hear what the politicians say. They don't actually understand properly what is going on in the real farming industry and the farming world. If it could be all sorted out with a cup of tea and a hobnob, as you put it, then absolutely great. You know, that would suit me down to the ground. That means I could then move on to the next issue I've got to deal with in my life, not just working about around a budget that has gone completely and utterly against our industry and a lot of the country.
So, Tim Taylor, we're seeing pictures on our screen there from back in March 2024 when there was a parade of tractors and other heavy vehicles from farms around Parliament Square. As we said, it's not about hobnobs and cups of tea for you. What have you got planned for this week? Anything you can tell us?
Obviously, I mean, there's a lot of people going tomorrow on foot to demonstrate and protest, which is great. The best thing we could actually hope for and achieve, and we know we're not going to get it, is the likes of Rachel Reeves to say, right, let's sit round the table and really discuss what the problems are. She believes, and a lot of the public believe, it's due to this inheritance tax. The inheritance tax was the final nail in the coffin. Our industry got hit 3 times minimally in one budget, whether that be the national insurance contributions, yes, the inheritance tax, but also the VAT on 4x4 trucks. Most farms have got a 4x4 truck to save getting stuck in the mud. They can get around the farms. They've got the towing capacity. We need 4x4s. To have all of a sudden the 20% VAT threshold took off that. Now, 3 times in one budget, that's just ridiculous. We're an industry that can't sustain them sort of hits every time something doesn't go our way.
So you said in comments I read earlier that you are not going to be calming down. We are escalating, and we'll be escalating big time. What will that look like when you come to London this week?
I'm predicting 5,000-6,000 people there tomorrow. I know it was requested for some not to turn up if they hadn't got membership fees to the National Farmers Union meeting. I know there's a secondary group that is going, and yeah, great. The more people, the better. We need the industry publicised, and we need the damage what the budget has done. So not just for farmers. You know, the farmer, believe it or not, is the middle of the line in the food processing system. You've got all the tractor manufacturers and designers of the pieces before that, the machinery manufacturers, the fertiliser manufacturers, the seed people. We are the centre of the line. There's a lot of industries rely on us, including haulage. Now, I'm trying to get the Road Haulage Association on side as well, because they're going to be affected in a big, big way by this budget. They're the sort of people we need to voice opinions for us to go, whoa, enough's enough. Yeah, we are completely reliant upon this industry, and we're being informed and regulated by a government who has got absolutely no idea how the rural way of life actually works.
So, Tim, I'm reading between the lines here, and I'm getting the notion you're talking about blockades. You're talking about stopping food getting to market. Am I right? I don't personally want to see any food getting stopped being delivered to market at all. I would love to see a lot of imports stopped, but that's not just for now.
Imports, I believe we need, but when our own products are empty. When our sheds are empty of wheat, by all means, import wheat. But don't import wheat when the British sheds are full. But as in the national insurance contribution system, what she's changed, you've got haulage companies and that obviously pick up products from farm. So it's the end user, it's the consumer that is going to end up paying the price for Rachel Reeves's inability to understand the countryside way of life.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. And that's Tim Taylor, the leader of the Pro Farmers United Union. And earlier on, the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, spoke to GB News. Here's what she said.
I respect the right of anyone within our country to demonstrate, to protest. It's an important principle, a long-standing principle of our democracy. I think it's something that people fought hard for, and it's right that we maintain it. So I respect their right to do that. What I would say, however, is that the changes that we're setting out will not affect the vast majority of farms or farmers, and we're talking about those often the wealthiest within our society. So these are tough decisions in the context of a budget where we do have to fix the foundations of our economy, where we want to make sure we can invest in our public services, but that did involve some difficult considerations for the Chancellor.
That was Bridget Phillipson earlier. Now it's time for your latest news headlines, and here's Sophie Reaper.
A very good afternoon to you. Let's take a look at your headlines this hour. We'll start with some breaking news from the last hour, as Defence Secretary John Healey has confirmed that a UK-led operation has trained 50,000 Ukrainian troops since 2022. Speaking earlier in the House of Commons, Healey told MPs that this has come as the result of Operation Interflex, which he's also now extended to run until the year 2025. This comes as world leaders are attending the G20 summit in Brazil. The PM also saying there that Ukraine is top of his agenda. This comes after President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. President Vladimir Putin warned the West they would be throwing fuel on the fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied missiles at Russia. This decision from Biden seems to have been prompted by a move from North Korea, in which they've sent thousands of troops to fight with Russia. Sir Keir Starmer has also said that a strong UK-China relationship is important for both of our countries after he met Chinese President Xi Jinping on the fringes of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir also suggested a full UK-China meeting in London or Beijing as part of his desire for what he called consistent, durable, respectful ties between the two countries. Sir Keir became the first Prime Minister to meet the Chinese president since 2018. And TV presenter Davina McCall has made an enormous leap forward in the last 24 hours. That's according to an update posted by her partner on Instagram. Michael Douglas has thanked well-wishers, adding that Davina is out of the ICU and is, quote, loving awareness. 57-year-old Davina revealed in a video posted on Instagram earlier on Friday she had a benign brain tumour, a colloid cyst, which she described as very rare. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's some pretty cold weather across parts of the UK at the moment, and with that there's the risk of some disruptive snow as we go through the next 24 hours because a frontal system is going to push in and bump into the cold air currently across many northern parts, leading to the rain turning to snow. Already as we go through the end of the afternoon, some snow over higher ground of Northern Ireland, but it's across parts of northern England where we're likely to see the greatest disruption from the snow, potentially 20 centimetres of lying snow above some higher ground, even a little bit to lower levels potentially. Further north, some wintry showers for northern Scotland, some clearer skies across other parts of Scotland, leading to a harsh frost here, temperatures perhaps falling as low as -8, but it's a milder, albeit cloudier and perhaps damp story further south. As we go through tomorrow morning then, those wintry showers could bring a bit of sleet, bit of snow, also some icy patches, so some difficult conditions first thing. A drier story though across more central and southern parts of Scotland. And by the morning, most of the wet and wintry weather will have cleared through Northern Ireland, and it will be clearing away from parts of northern England too. Further south, it's a milder start to the day. There will be some outbreaks of rain, but again, most of that will be clearing away towards the east as we go through the morning. A lot of dry weather then following in behind, and things should turn a bit sunnier as well for many places, especially towards the north. But towards the southwest here, there will be some outbreaks of rain around, and some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. We will see our temperatures actually dropping for some places as we go through the day. A real chilly feel to things, and with some brisk winds coming in from the north, it is going to feel particularly cold indeed. We stick with that northerly wind as we go through the end of the day, so still some wintry showers, particularly across northern parts of Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland too, and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind. And that's the theme as we go through the rest of the week, really. A cold feel with some wintry showers at times. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello to you. I'm Jules Buckley. There's queues either side of the M6 this afternoon. Firstly, northbound junction 28 to 29. That's from Leyland up to Lostock Hall. There's a breakdown there causing queues. A lane shut. There's one as well southbound. Again, a lane closure in place on the M6. Sandbatch 17 down towards Crewe and Stoke at 16. Slow going. Cambridge now 3 lanes coned off on the southbound A1M. Just before Alconbury at junction 14, 2 lorries involved in a collision, so just 1 lane open, very slow going. A couple of issues on the eastbound M4, firstly from 10 Wokingham to Maidenhead at 8, slow for nearly a breakdown. Also eastbound, slow at 6 to Langley 5. Lane 4, the outside lane's out, there's been a bump there. And lane 1's out southbound M40 away from Beaconsfield at 2, a lorry there having a tyre change.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. 4:39 is your time, and I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has urged police to focus on what matters most as Essex Police investigate the Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson over allegations of inciting racial hatred with a now deleted tweet. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former Scotland Yard detective, great friend of the show and top all-round fella, Peter Blacksley. Peter, welcome to the show. Isn't it amazing? Seems to be something of an epiphany from the Prime Minister. Let's start policing the streets, not tweets. Peter, it was only back in the summer the Prime Minister was banging people up for Facebook posts.
And courts are still sentencing people to jail terms for posting various things on social media. Let's just see how long this lasts for. Because Keir Starmer and his Labour Party are a fair representation of the liberal leftist wokerati that have driven so much of this diversity, equality and inclusion into policing and into universities, of course. And policing, regrettably, is in the grip of academia and has its own body called the College of Policing, which, quite frankly, is not fit for purpose and hands down so much of the inadequate training and ridiculous directives to the police. So couple all of that with the fact that the overwhelming bulk of senior police officers these days have all been off to university, have all taken on board nonsense ideology and got so remote, so far detached from the concerns of the everyday men and women in the UK that we have a police service that spends so much time on stuff that, quite frankly, should be marked no further action, and we are in the dreadful state that we're in.
Peter Blacksley, we often hear that this is bad law being passed down by the top brass. It's not the rank and file bobbies, the boys and the girls in blue on the beat, you have to go and knock on the door, that enjoy doing this. Is this true? Or do you think maybe since COVID lockdowns there are a few bobbies out there that got a taste for this authoritarianism?
Yeah, I think that elements of both are actually true, to be frank. The College of Policing, which I've mentioned, hands down so many of these directives, and it's a nonsense, discredited organisation. Only the College of Policing thinks that the College of Policing is worth keeping. Nobody else does. But this this liberal kind of wokerati attitude that has polluted senior policing does, regrettably, filter down to the officers who want to climb the greasy pole of promotion. So you now get superintendents who are very good at filling out a spreadsheet, but have got away from the rough and tumble of frontline policing as quickly as they possibly could. And they rise without trace, these senior officers. They have a lack of experience. Consequently, they don't have much merit with the frontline troops. And they just hand down directive, instructions and orders that, quite frankly, have the members of the public scratching their heads and some of their own officers going, we'd rather be catching burglars.
But Peter Blexley, it's also true to say there are police and crime commissioners that we have on this show. Donna Jones, for example, she's the police and crime commissioner for Hampshire. She's the same job, but for a different county, as this individual from Essex that has been pushing for a prosecution on Alison Pearson. And Donna Jones says that these directives are nonsense, the non-crime hate incidents. She'd like to see them kicked out. So it's fair to say it's not all coppers that have been festooned with this. Some are common sense, and there is some hope.
Well, we hope so, but it's senior policing has got to change its attitude, and that might well take a generation, unfortunately, until police officers start getting promoted on merit. When they get promoted, when they've got some experience, operational experience, rather than this rush to the top by very mediocre, at best, senior police officers who simply know how to do the promotion process rather than actually do policing, then nothing's going to change. They have to buy into the ideology, they have to carry on with the wokeness, and then consequently, all of this festers. It's going to take a huge sea change, and it will need somebody senior in government who holds the post for a long time to go, the public deserve better. The public want coppers doing coppering, and they really do. And when they do it, the public love it, they appreciate it, and trust in the police could be won back very, very quickly and very, very simply.
And Peter Blexley, we've got a quick minute to end on. You do agree, right, that hate speech should be policed, but those laws already exist, right? Is your feeling that we've simply let this wander too far? The mission creep has gone too far now?
You have nailed it, Martin. There is adequate legislation for people that want to spread real hate, incite violence, incite racism. There's plenty of legislation to deal with that. But the hurty words on social media platforms falls into this uncomfortable kind of no man's land where the police suddenly decide it's their job to police it, when quite frankly, much of it is utter nonsense, could just be filed under no further action, and the police could get on with solving some of the millions of unsolved crimes that happen in this country every year.
Peter Blexley, once again, please stop sitting on that fence. You'll get splinters in your backside. Peter Blexley, it was an absolute delight to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Now, Essex Police released the following statement in response to Alison Pearson's case. Essex Police cuts crime. There were over 9,000 fewer reported offences in the last year and 20,000 fewer than 5 years ago. Our officers and staff, some of which are military veterans, work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to keep the public safe and investigate crime. Now next, I'll be paying tribute to James McMahon, the music expert and friend of the show and a pal of mine who has tragically died aged just 44. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
This is about pulchronomics, which is the often hidden, often controversial economics of beauty. And there's this guy, he's called, here it says Anil Hamamesh, but I think they've missed out the D, so I'm guessing he's Daniel rather than Anil, which he might be, though. He might be or he might be anal for an Anil Hamamesh, maybe. That's his unfortunate name. But basically, he's looked into how ugliness affects people, and it turns out he's discovered that ugly people are less attractive. And that affects them for the rest of their life. Now, where this does get interesting, it is worrying because, of course, this is going to lead to the ugly rights movement, ugly pride march down some dirty back street. And but I remember hearing about this at the time. People born in the UK between March 3rd and March 9th, 1958, were part of this massive survey that was done, which was finding about what would happen to them later in life, and it went through a number of different factors. But I didn't know this. The teachers were also asked to rate their pupils on attractiveness.
Yeah, it's a bit pedo-y.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that would wash now, but it was bone structure and where they're symmetrical, that kind of thing.
You should probably really have a committee of at least half a dozen teachers. Take a sort of standardised view across that. You might get a different point of view from the biology teacher, from the Latin master.
You suggest this to a school, and then we can see if we get it going.
It's interesting, though. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but generally speaking, it is understood within sort of psychological, psychometrics and so on, that IQ is the thing that most closely maps your outcomes, generally speaking. But the idea of beauty is the one that isn't discussed. And there is genuinely a theory that this is actually the great determinant of your life chances.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 10 to 5 and I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, the former Enemy journalist, podcast host, editor of Kerrang and Oasis superfan, James McMahon has sadly died at the too young age of 44. As a veteran of music journalism, he often came onto the channel to discuss the latest goings-on in the industry and became a much adored friend of the show. And after Oasis reunited, he told me about his battle with cancer and how much the band meant to him.
When I was growing up, I was into music. I got into it at an early stage. But I remember hearing Oasis, and I remember hearing Live Forever. My town, not a lot going on. I mean, obviously, Doncaster is the greatest football team the world has ever seen. But apart from that, not a lot going on. Failing industries, a lot of depression in the town. And I remember hearing Live Forever, and I remember thinking, these people understand me, and I want my life to feel like this record sounds. And I've kind of always felt like that. And what I was going to tell you was that I've been in hospital until a week ago, the last 47 days. I'm going through some treatment, some cancer treatment. And I got a whisper, as music journalists do, that this was probably going to happen. And when I'm lying there in the bed and I'm thinking all sorts of things, I'm thinking how long my life is going to be now. I was thinking about, I want to see Oasis again. I want to feel like I did when I was a kid. And I genuinely cannot think of another band that would make me feel like that. And I know that I used to work, before I was a music journalist, working class kid from up north. I worked in factories, I worked night shifts. I've met so many people in my life that have had Oasis tattoos or Oasis lyrics etched into their skin for life. I can't think of another band that command that kind of commitment and devotion from, and I say this with all the infection in the world, common people. I think that, it's not going to be old dudes. It's going to be kids. If you see that crowd at Leeds and Reading Festival this weekend, that's kids. Because they look at Liam and they go, our lives, we've been told that everything about our lives is crap. We've been told that we can't do this, we can't say that, we can't be this. We've been told, the young people have had fear instilled in them. And then they see Liam on stage looking like the Dogs. And they go, I want a bit of that. And that's the same as what I wanted when I was 15. And I think that I'm so excited that this generation is going to get to see disband and feel like I did when I was 15. There's an Oasis song called Do You Want to Be a Spaceman? And it's basically it's sung by Noel. It's an early B-side. And it's basically about Noel, the protagonist, who frames himself as in his town, he meets someone 10 years on that he used to knock about with, and he goes, you remember you wanted to be a spaceman? And like now you're married, you've got how many kids, your life's banal. And when I hear that song, which I was listening to several times this morning, my eyes well up, and I think I want to feel like that forever. And I want kids to feel like that, because I think that will make this country better. I feel that will make the culture of this country better if we can make kids dream again and not so frightened of what they say and how they dress and what they do. And we need the 90s back, man. And it's not the 90s. So let's get Oasis to drag some of that spirit into the present day.
And that's the music journalist James McMahon, who died at the age of 44 a few days ago. Came as a great shock to me. He always said to me, you know, he was just wanted to get a ticket to go and see Oasis. And as you heard there, how he hoped when he was poorly with cancer treatment that he would just live, not forever, but live to see Oasis. He didn't get that chance. I didn't get a ticket either. He didn't get a ticket. He came back on the show after that. I said, did you get a ticket, Jim? He said, no, I didn't, man. I always promised myself that if I got a ticket, I was going to give it to Jim. But, yeah, he didn't make it. But, look, he was an absolute legend. There's a Just Giving page there that his family are trying to raise £7,500 to support people with OCD in memory of James McMahon, and they've superseded that target, over 10 grand raised. Look, I know times are difficult. You might not have even known him, but he was an absolute legend. Sadly missed. James McMahon has gone. All the best, mate. Sleep tight. Now, Ukrainian MP is calling for Britain to follow America's lead in helping their war against Russia, even putting boots on the ground. I'll be speaking to him next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now's your weather with Alex Burkill.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. There's some pretty cold weather across parts of the UK at the moment, and with that, there's the risk of some disruptive snow as we go through the next 24 hours, because a frontal system is going to push in and bump into the cold air currently across many northern parts, leading to the rain turning to snow. Already as we go through the end of the afternoon, some snow over higher ground of Northern Ireland, but it's across parts of northern England where we're likely to see the greatest disruption from the snow, potentially 20 centimetres of lying snow above some higher ground, even a little bit to lower levels potentially. Further north, some wintry showers for northern Scotland, some clearer skies across other parts of Scotland, leading to a harsh frost here, temperatures perhaps falling as low as -8, but it's a milder, albeit cloudier and perhaps damp story further south. As we go through tomorrow morning then, those wintry showers could bring a bit of sleet, bit of snow, also some icy patches, so some difficult conditions first thing. A drier story though across more central and southern parts of Scotland, and by the morning most of the wet and wintry weather will have cleared through Northern Ireland, and it will be clearing away from parts of northern England too. Further south it's a milder start to the day. There will be some outbreaks of rain, but again most of that will be clearing away towards the east as we go through the morning. A lot of dry weather then following in behind, and things should turn a bit sunnier as well for many places, especially towards the north. But towards the southwest here, there will be some outbreaks of rain around, and some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. We will see our temperatures actually dropping for some places as we go through the day. A real chilly feel to things, and with some brisk winds coming in from the north, it is going to feel particularly cold indeed. We stick with that northerly wind as we go through the end of the day, so still some wintry showers, particularly across northern parts of Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland too, and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind. And that's the theme as we go through the rest of the week, really. A cold feel with some wintry showers at times. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Glasgow, the M8 heading westbound around junction 23 for Ibrox. Now a lane shut for a breakdown there. The queue's back towards the M74 junction 1A. Congestion too this afternoon for the M6. Firstly, northbound Leyland up to Lostock Hall, junction 28 to 29, so up towards the M65 turn-off. A breakdown causing queues, a lane shut. There's one as well southbound the M6, just back on the move. All lanes open, but still slow. Sandbach and Crewe 17. Down towards Stoke at 16. Leicestershire southbound M1 around the turn-off for Nottingham South 24. Just before that junction, there's queues, a lane blocked at the scene of a collision. Same scenario in Berkshire. Eastbound M4 slow at 6 to Langley 5. The outside lane is coned off. There's a collision. It's causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, in one of his final acts as US President, Joe Biden has given permission to Ukraine to launch missiles into Russia. The Kremlin and Donald Trump's top team have accused Biden of pouring oil on the fire of World War III. Was it provocative? Was it the principled thing to do? I'll speak to a member of the Ukrainian parliament soon. And Jet Set Starmer's global tour continues, with the G20 summit seeing the Prime Minister chalk up his 10th foreign trip in just 2 months. We've had 2-tier Kia and even 3-gear Kia. Now it's never here Kia. Is it right for Starmer to be living La Vida Loca while furious farmers rally back in Blighty? We'll ask our man in Brazil, Chris Hope. And tomorrow, thousands of angry farmers are set to descend on Westminster to protest against the Prime Minister that some militant farmers are now calling Keir Starmer the farmer harmer. I'll be speaking to a French politician to hear how they're protesting on the continent as we speak. And a children's charity has claimed that 40% of teachers have been forced to wash a school children's uniform to combat what they're calling a boom in hygiene poverty. Some schools have even installed laundrettes. Is this a welcome intervention, or is it simply the nanny state gone mad? And a British TikToker has sparked outrage by declaring, "Let's make Christmas Palestinian." With Christmas carols, school nativity plays, Christmas markets and even pantos increasingly having references to Christmas airbrushed out or even removed to appease a vocal minority. Are we in danger of seeing Christmas cancelled? That's all coming in your next hour. What's the show? Always a pleasure to have your company. So in around about 24 hours' time, this studio, I'm hoping, will be jam-packed with farmers who've been at that protest in Westminster to tell us why they were down here, what they think should be done, and do they believe they will get a resolution. We've already had a farmer and his son on the show earlier, a very moving interview with Clive and Henry, his boy, aged 12. Henry just wants to farm. His father says that might not be possible. Have they got it completely wrong on farmers? Have they bitten off more than they can chew? Do you think anything will happen tomorrow of consequence? What would you like to see as a resolution? And has Christmas been more or less airbrushed out of your town? It has around where we live. They don't even call it Christmas anymore. It's called winter festivities. It's called the holiday season. Whatever happened to Christmas? Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Sophie Reaper.
Thank you very much, Martin. The time is 3 minutes past 5, and these are your latest GB News headlines. With world leaders attending the G20 summit in Brazil, the PM has said Ukraine is top of his agenda. This comes after President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. President Vladimir Putin warned the West they would be throwing fuel on the fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western supplies, cruise and ballistic missiles at Russia. This decision from Biden seems to have been prompted by a move from North Korea, in which they've sent thousands of troops to fight with Russia. Earlier, Shadow Secretary of State for Defence James Cartledge said the move from the US president is justified.
Russia invaded Ukraine, wholly unprovoked, illegal invasion, a dictatorship invading a democracy. So it's been the right thing to do to not be directly involved in Ukraine, but to support them in whatever way we can in terms of providing munitions. That's helped Ukraine to check their advance. But there's been a major development. We talk about escalation. Imagine how the Russians would feel if 10,000 NATO troops were now in Ukraine supporting them. The fact is 10,000 North Korean troops have been deployed into this battle. We understand from the US State Department they've been injected directly into the fight with Russia. That is a major strategic development, and I think in those circumstances this decision is justified.
Sir Keir Starmer has also said a strong UK-China relationship is important for both our countries. That was as he met Chinese President Xi Jinping on the fringes of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir also suggested a full UK-China meeting in London or Beijing as part of his desire for what he called consistent, durable, respectful ties between the two countries. Sir Keir has become the first PM to meet the Chinese president since 2018. Elsewhere in politics, Sir Keir Starmer says he's absolutely confident that the vast majority of farms and farmers will not be affected by changes to inheritance taxes announced in the budget. The row over the taxes for farms worth more than £1 million continues as the PM said last night that the money the government has put into the sector is, quote, not to be overlooked. A protest is expected in Westminster tomorrow as farmers rally on Whitehall against the changes announced in last month's budget, while separately the National Farmers Union will hold a mass lobby of MPs in their effort to get the government to rethink. Earlier, the 12-year-old son of a British farmer told this programme how the changes could impact his dream of becoming a farmer.
It makes me feel like disappointed in the government because they're taking away something that me and I'm guessing all of my generation of farms opportunities to become farmers when they're older. I'd say just think about how this affects my generation of farmers and how it affects their future of doing something that they've dreamed about for years.
Domestic energy prices are expected to go up again in the new year, according to consultancy firm Cornwall Insight. A household using a typical amount of gas and electricity will pay £1,736 a year from January, according to the forecaster. That would be a £17 a year rise or a 1% increase compared with the current typical annual bill of £1,717, with prices forecast to stay high for the rest of winter. Energy regulator Ofgem will announce the next official quarterly price cap on Friday. The energy cap limits the maximum price that can be charged for each unit of gas and electricity rather than the total bill. And the Met Office says the UK is braced for disruptive snow, ice and cold temperatures over the coming days. Up to 20 centimetres of snow may accumulate in the worst affected areas in what's being described by the Met Office as the country's first taste of winter. Today, snow and frost have been recorded across parts of the Yorkshire Dales, as well as in certain areas of Scotland, including at the Cogarth Viewpoint in Aberdeenshire. That's as an amber warning comes into force at 7 p.m. this evening, covering the east and north of England, the Midlands and Yorkshire and Humber, with yellow alerts coming into place for the south east, south west and London as of 8 a.m. tomorrow, all lasting until 6 p.m. on Saturday. For now, those are your latest GB News headlines. It's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Now, Sir Keir Starmer says he wants to shore up international support for Ukraine as he attended the G20 summit in Brazil today. And GB News' political editor Christopher Hope has been there for us.
Another week, another trip for Sir Keir Starmer. He's been away a lot since the beginning of September, but for the PM, travelling overseas is how he can bang the drum for British trade. And that's why he met President Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, early today here at Rio. At the G20 summit of world leaders. The focus there has been on trade and bringing those two countries back together. Yes, the relationships have been in the deep freeze under the last Tory government, but this Labour government is trying to reset that. We heard from the PM earlier they want to establish a strong UK-China relationship important for both countries and for the broader international community. And for China, from the Xinhua news agency, they say the UK and China should uphold their strategic partnership and open up new prospects in bilateral relations. So a reset there, but overhanging this entire summit in the heat here in Brazil is what's happening in Ukraine. From reports in the States, we think the US has allowed Ukraine to fire long-range weapons into the heart of Russia, threatening Russian troops and North Korean troops. But we have yet to hear from either the US on the record and certainly not from the UK or France, which helped to manufacture those weapons. We may hear more later, and that could change the temperature altogether here in Rio. Christopher Hope, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Not at all jealous that Chris is in Rio while it's drizzling here in Blighty. Now, moving on, are we on the brink of World War III once again? Because Joe Biden has given approval for Ukraine to strike targets within Russia with US-supplied long-range missiles for the first time. Now, will we in Britain follow suit? We've already committed nearly £13 billion for Ukraine. That's £7.8 billion in military support and a further £5 billion in non-military support. And let's bring in now GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who has some breaking news for us. Mark, what's your breaking news?
Well, of course, amid the sort of increase in tensions in that region, we're getting reports from authorities in Finland that the Sea Lion 1 undersea data cable has been severed. It was severed and all communications lost along that data cable that connects Finland to Germany and therefore to the European mainland, Central European mainland. All services on that data link were lost in the early hours of this morning. Authorities in Finland have given a news conference at which they were asked whether sabotage is suspected. A spokesman for the company responsible for this data cable said that it's too early to tell whether it was sabotage, but certainly an outside force would be required to cause the kind of loss of services on this fibre optic cable that runs on this seabed for some 750 miles from Helsinki down into Germany. economy itself. Of course, suspicions will turn to Russia, because Russia has been accused of attacking undersea infrastructure in the past, always denied it. But we know that the Royal Navy, for instance, in the UK is investing in naval ships to try to increase our ability and our resilience to look after our undersea infrastructure. And the fear is that any kind of war that comes, or tensions that come from Russia, and such as the US giving Ukraine the use of these longer range missiles, might not come in the form, and probably wouldn't come in the form of any kind of hot war, but might come in the form of attacks like this. Very early on, and no indication from the authorities to confirm it was sabotage at this stage, but it is being investigated, Martin.
And Mark White, we've been speaking throughout the show about this decision to allow missiles to be fired deep into Russian territory. Is it the principled thing to do to help end the war? Is it a provocative thing? Certainly that's what the Kremlin, what Vladimir Putin and what Donald Trump's top team are saying. Is it pure politics? But Mark White seems to have moved on now, and that is, should the United Kingdom follow suit? And even, let's talk about getting boots on the ground in Ukraine, Mark.
Well, it's a really interesting one in terms of whether the UK will follow suit. Logic would tend to dictate that it would, and that we would provide our equivalent to the US long-range missiles, the Storm Shadow missiles that Ukraine has already been using against, in particular, naval targets in Crimea, which, of course, is still in Ukraine. So these missiles can be used against those targets. The UK has been calling on the US for some time to allow Ukraine the flexibility to be able to use longer range Western supplied missiles in Russia, on Russian mainland. And of course, the US has been resisting up until now. So now that the US has given the green light for that, you would imagine that Britain would follow suit. But incidentally, we've just heard in the past day from the German government, from Chancellor Olaf Scholz, that the German government will not allow the Ukrainians to use their equivalent of the long-range missiles, the Taurus system, on targets within Russia. And of course, Olaf Scholz caused a great degree of anger in Kyiv as well, with some stern comments from Volodymyr Zelensky when he telephoned Vladimir Putin in recent days, holding a 2-hour telephone conversation with Vladimir Putin, the first Western leader to do that since the invasion almost 3 years ago.
Okay, Mark White, excellent and comprehensive as ever. Thank you very, very much for joining me on the show. Thank you. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has been speaking today in Rio at the G20 summit, and this is what he had to say about the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
I'm at the G20 with one message, which is that we must double down on our support for Ukraine. Tomorrow is day 1,000 of the conflict. That's 1,000 days of aggression from Russia and 1,000 days of sacrifice from Ukraine. So that is my clear message here. It's number one on my agenda. Obviously, I'm not going to get into operational details because the only winner, if we were to do that, is Putin, and I'm not prepared to do that.
That's Keir Starmer earlier on in Rio. And my next guest is a Ukrainian Member of Parliament, and it's Alexei Goncharenko. Thank you very much for joining me on the show. Alexei, you have suggested in the past that Western countries should consider sending troops to help Ukraine end its war in Russia. That's a red line that hasn't been crossed to date. Why do you think we should be doing that now?
Oh, because Russia is already doing it. Russian allies, North Korea, is sending troops to them. Russian allies, Iran is giving them drones. It's our common enemies, all these axis of chaos. Iran, North Korea, Russia, standing behind them, China. And already North Koreans are killing Europeans in Europe. What we are waiting for. Your question is, are we on the brink of the World War III? Isn't it a World War III where North Korea is fighting in Europe? So I think we are there. And we have allies. and our allies are helping us, and we're very thankful for this support. But one more thing is to send troops, not to be in the trenches on the front line, but at least, for example, to secure Ukrainian-Belarusian border, which will free a lot of Ukrainian troops, which we can use against Russians, to help us with training of Ukrainian troops, but not somewhere far away from Ukraine, but inside Ukraine, cybersecurity, air defense, many auxiliary missions where foreign troops can help us, and that will be the sign for Putin, you will not take the whole of Ukraine. You will not. So I think it's really important, and I think it's something which should be on the table.
Alexei, what would you say to British people with memories of previous conflicts where British soldiers were killed in, for example, in Afghanistan, in Central Europe, and other fields of conflict? There's a reluctance to put troops on the ground in case there are casualties, and also £11 billion of money has been sent by British taxpayers now. Back in Britain, for example, politicians have just cut the winter fuel allowance to millions of British pensioners who won't get enough money to heat their homes this winter. What do you say to those who feel weary and afraid of getting dragged into a broader conflict?
Sure, I understand that everybody lives their life, and it's for many people, maybe it looks like far away Ukraine. Why should it matter for us? My answer is next. If they don't want British soldiers to die, that's why we need this support. Because British soldiers are staying in Baltic countries, and believe me, Putin will never stop on Ukraine. Like he never stopped, he's attacked Georgia, Moldova, Syria, then Ukraine. He's not going to stop. And if he will attack Baltic countries, that will be British soldiers who will fight and die there. And I don't want this to happen. So there is a unique chance now to prevent this. Like it was in the Second World War. If Hitler would be stopped in Poland, then a lot of British people would not die and British people would not suffer. That's the moment when we can prevent this scenario. This is the first thing that I would say to British people. And the second thing, I know that British people are decent people, are people who believe in their word and are proud of their country. And I want to remind that 30 years ago, exactly these days, in Budapest, United States of America and United Kingdom made Ukraine give up our nukes to Russia. And that was called Budapest Memorandum. And United States and United Kingdom gave us guarantees. It was a piece of paper, and now we can go with this piece of paper just to toilet. If we would have our nukes today it was the missile fault 250 meters from my home. 10 people were killed. I was there. People in blood, dying, crying, screaming. And if this would never happen if we would have our nuclear weapons, because never, ever anybody would attack us. But United States and United Kingdom made us to give it to Russia. That's also a responsibility, which now should be taken, because it's something which should be fixed. And I think this is very, very, very important.
Alexei, you speak movingly of the trauma and the tragedy that Ukraine has been through. And of course, British people remember wars that their children have fought into and our grandfathers. I wondered, rather than escalating this war, what about the Donald Trump route? What about some form of resolution, sitting down and trying to bring an end to hostilities rather than more soldiers, more weapons, more missiles? What would you say to that approach?
Absolutely. Tell me, who else in the world wants this war to end more than Ukrainians? We're dying every day, every day. We want this war to end. But who told you that Putin is going to stop? Who told you this? Why would he stop? This is the kind of people, tell me, maniacs, can they stop? Can you say to maniac, oh, just take this one woman and be okay, and maybe now you are okay, your hunger is satisfied. It doesn't work like this. Oh, you put it to the maniac to the cage. Oh, he will kill, rape, and kill again. That's the nature. Putin is a geopolitical maniac, dictator. So that's the problem. We want peace. Nobody in the world wants it more than we do. But unfortunately, the only way to make Putin to go to peace is through strength. That's the only way. I hope that President Trump will be successful in what he wants to do. I pray on this.
OK, thank you very, very much for joining us. Alexei Goncharenko, an impassioned, marvellous thank you very much for joining us. A Ukrainian member of parliament there, joining us on GB News. Now, it's not just the farmers over here that are unhappy, because French farmers are protesting against the possible signing of a trade deal between the European Union and 4 major South American countries, which they fear will ruin their livelihoods. And guess what? Macron is in Rio now trying to sort that out. More on that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Restaurant St. Bart's executive head chef Johnny Crowe creates ramen with a British twist, using only the finest UK-sourced produce. As the only restaurant in London to hold both a Michelin star and a green Michelin star, St. Bart's emphasises sustainability and the diversity of British ingredients. Johnny joins me now. Johnny, congratulations on having these 2 Michelins. How do you get a Michelin green star?
Probably a better question for the inspectors, but I mean, I think it's down to a lot of hard work.
What hoops do you have to go through?
So I think it's working every day on it. The sustainability isn't something that you just achieve and then therefore you have it and you can sort of relax. It's about every day trying to be better, trying to make a restaurant and a business that is overly sustainable.
So what things do you do to make it sustainable?
One of the main things that we've really tried to do is focusing on British produce, and actually, you know, part of that is about sustainability and food miles. A massive part of it for us was also about sort of helping the British economy and the farming economy and our fisheries as well. But yeah, no, the idea...
I have a lot of farms near St. Bart's, which is in the heart of the City of London.
Well, funnily enough, there's an amazing collective called Shrub Provisions, who we use a hell of a lot, who work with farmers all around East Sussex. So it makes a difference from flying it in from Kenya or somewhere else like that. But no, like a big part of it was, one, using British produce to cut down on food miles, but also helping sustain our farming industry.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Farmers are staging dozens of protests across France against the possible signing of a major trade deal between the European Union and 4 South African countries, which they fear will ruin their livelihoods. And the Prime Minister was asked today about his view on tomorrow's protest. He said the inheritance tax will not affect the majority of farmers.
We are supporting farmers, and I want to support farmers. And that is why we put £5 billion in the budget over the next 2 years into farming. That's the single biggest sum of money that's ever been put in, alongside money to do with flooding and to do with the outbreak of disease, which can be terrible for farmers. On the question of inheritance tax, look, I do understand that it's causing concern, but if you take a typical case of a couple wanting to pass a family farm down to one of their children, which would be a very typical example, with all of the thresholds in place, that's £3 million before any inheritance tax is paid. And that's why I'm confident that the vast majority of farms and farmers will not be affected at all by that aspect of the budget. They will be affected by the £5 billion that we're putting into farming, and I'm very happy to work with farmers on that.
Okay.
Well, meanwhile, over the channel, the French farmers are furious again. And joining me now to discuss this is the parliamentarian at the Rassemblement National, and that's Guillaume Bigot. Welcome to the show. Can you tell me about the mood amongst French farmers and why, on this particular occasion, they are so angry? I understand this major trade deal with South America could hammer the livelihood of French farmers. Tell us how.
Well, you have to know that, first of all, one every 2 days, one French farmer is committing suicide. Their revenue is extremely low. And this country, which was able to nourish most of Western Europe, is now not totally capable to nourish itself because the type of standards, mainly phytosanitary standards imposed by European unions, are incredibly tough. At the same time, European unions is forcing our hands to sign those free trade treaties like Mercosur with Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay. And the thing is, where most of the French people are not against free trade, but you have to understand that the standards on these countries are zero, and the standards on French farmers extremely high. So now the farmers and most of the French people understood that the European Union made, let's say, tried to guess what was going to be the consequences of this opening to the new South American countries on free trade. And the results anticipated by the European Commission are clear. It's more carbon dioxide in the air because of the imports. It's going to be a lower quality food, and it's going to be a decrease of 15% of the production and 20% in the revenues. So everybody's asking ourselves, asking the governments, why are you signing this? It's almost like committing suicide, and knowing that doing this, you're going to demolish our own capacity to produce food. And the answer is very clear. It's because Germany needs those type of agreements to sell their cars to those countries. So they want to sacrifice French farmers, and the French farmers will say no.
And Monsieur Bigot, we saw earlier in the year French farmers taking to Brussels in protest at these measures, and we understand there was some climb down by Ursula von der Leyen, but you guys want there to be a rejection of this deal, because as you say, the net zero demands on French farmers are pushing down the profitability of the industry. You cannot compete with these cheap imports coming across meats, vegetables. And do you think Monsieur Macron, your president, will actually come back with a better deal for French farmers, or have you completely lost faith in him?
No, he can't, because of the treaty that we've signed previously, and mainly that he supported. France has supported those negotiations. They were almost frozen since 2016, and for now the 2 or 3 last years, the French government supported these agreements. And now, the Emmanuel Macron, the president, and his former government's Gabriel Attal, they discovered the scale of the outrage of the agriculture world. And now they're going to back up, but it's too late. It's too late because the power to sign those type of agreements is in the hands of Brussels. So in my view, there's negotiations between the French president and the European Commissions to, let's say, gain some time. But the thing is, the agreement is already signed at the time that we're speaking.
And Monsieur Bigot, does this make French nationals question the continued relationship, the membership of France with the European Union? Is the spirit of Frexit in the air?
Not necessarily the membership, but undoubtedly the way European Union works or doesn't work in the interest of the people. And of course, more than anything else, the way democracy and the expression of the popular votes functions and impacts the governments. People are discovering the fact that not only non-democratic power is deciding for ourselves, but is deciding things against the European Union people and consumers and producers' interest. So that's more or less of a shock, to say the least. So now it seems that European Union is going by itself without any other interest that to defend some sort of an ideal representation of globalization. And as everybody knows, now China and Russia are on the rise, and this so-called globalization was no more than an Americanization of the trade. And it's not working that way. It's not working that way since China entered the OMC, the World Trade Agreements, and it's especially not working that way for the French industry. I can tell you that French industry has been divided by two for the last 24 years, and the French people realized that it's going to be the same with agriculture. Agriculture was one of the last thing was tourism that was left to push French prosperity and French, let's say, level of life. Now it's going to die too. So it seems to me that the situation is quite critical at this time.
Thank you very much. The spirit of revolution once again is in the air with French farmers. Thank you very much for joining us. And that's the parliamentarian of the Rassemblement National, that's Guillaume Bigot, for joining us here on GB News. Now, there's more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including a children's charity has claimed that 40% of teachers have been forced to wash a school child's uniform to combat what they're calling a boom in hygiene poverty. Is this a good idea, or is it nanny state gone mad? But first, is your headlines with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. Let's take a look at your latest headlines for this hour. With world leaders attending the G20 summit in Brazil, the PM has also said that Ukraine is top of his agenda. This comes after President Joe Biden has given the green light to Kyiv to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike inside Russia. President Vladimir Putin warned the West they would be throwing fuel on the fire if they allowed Ukrainian forces to launch Western-supplied missiles at Russia. This decision from Biden seems to have been prompted by a move from North Korea, in which they've sent thousands of troops to fight with Russia. Speaking in the last hour, Sir Keir Starmer has reinforced the importance of supporting Ukraine.
I'm at the G20 with one message, which is that we must double down on our support for Ukraine. Tomorrow is day 1,000 of the conflict. That's 1,000 days of aggression from Russia and 1,000 days of sacrifice from Ukraine. So that is my clear message here. It's number one on my agenda. Obviously, I'm not going to get into operational details because the only winner, if we were to do that, is Putin, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir has also said a strong UK-China relationship is important for both our countries. That was as he met Chinese President Xi Jinping on the fringes of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. Sir Keir also suggested a full UK-China meeting in London or Beijing as part of his desire for what he called consistent, durable, respectful ties between the two countries. The PM has become the first British Prime Minister to meet the Chinese president since 2018. And TV presenter Davina McCall has made an enormous leap forward in the last 24 hours. That's according to an update posted by her partner on Instagram. Michael Douglas has thanked well-wishers, adding that Davina is out of the ICU and is, quote, loving awareness. 57-year-old Davina had revealed in a video posted on Instagram earlier on Friday, she said a benign brain tumour, a colloid cyst, which she described as very rare. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next half an hour.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
But before I go, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2625 and €1.1948. The price of gold is £2,063.63 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,065.34 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There's some pretty cold weather across parts of the UK at the moment, and with that there's the risk of some disruptive snow as we go through the next 24 hours because a frontal system is going to push in and bump into the cold air currently across many northern parts, leading to the rain turning to snow. Already as we go through the end of the afternoon, some snow over higher ground of Northern Ireland, but it's across parts of northern England where we're likely to see the greatest disruption from the snow, potentially 20 centimetres of lying snow above some higher ground, even a little bit to lower levels potentially. Further north, some wintry showers for northern Scotland, some clearer skies across other parts of Scotland, leading to a harsh frost here, temperatures perhaps falling as low as -8, but it's a milder, albeit cloudier and perhaps damp story further south. As we go through tomorrow morning then, those wintry showers could bring a bit of sleet, bit of snow, also some icy patches, so some difficult conditions first thing. A drier story though across more central and southern parts of Scotland. And by the morning, most of the wet and wintry weather will have cleared through Northern Ireland, and it will be clearing away from parts of northern England too. Further south, it's a milder start to the day. There will be some outbreaks of rain, but again, most of that will be clearing away towards the east as we go through the morning. A lot of dry weather then following in behind, and things should turn a bit sunnier as well for many places, especially towards the north. But towards the southwest here, there will be some outbreaks of rain around, and some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. We will see our temperatures actually dropping for some places as we go through the day. A real chilly feel to things, and with some brisk winds coming in from the north, it is going to feel particularly cold indeed. We stick with that northerly wind as we go through the end of the day, so still some wintry showers, particularly across northern parts of Scotland, but also parts of Northern Ireland too, and anywhere exposed to that northerly wind. And that's the theme as we go through the rest of the week, really. A cold feel with some wintry showers at times. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long queues heading west of Glasgow on the M8. One lane's closed at junction 23 at Dunbrake Road, where a lorry's broken down, heading all the way back to the M74. And in Staffordshire, northwest of Sutton Coldfield, at Little Aston, the A454, the Walsall Road, shut for emergency repair works. In Cambridgeshire, the A1M down to a single lane southbound from Salttree to Alconbury, so just north of Huntingdon, of course, at the scene of an accident involving two lorries. East Sussex, south of Halland, the A22 is closed along the East Hoveley bypass off the Shaw roundabout for emergency repairs. And in Flintshire, finally, at Flint, the Norfolk Road is shut near to the high school. Investigation works taking place following an accident. Trains are suspended eastbound up in Cumbria, out of Barrow Furness down to Lancashire to Lancaster because of flooding at Ulverston. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back, it's 20 to 6. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now here's one for you, because teachers are being forced to plug even more gaps, as nearly half of them say that they're washing their pupils' clothes. And those surveys say they're trying to combat what they're calling hygiene poverty and stop struggling children from being bullied. Well, joining us now to discuss this is the GP and the medical writer, Dr. René Honderkamp. Dr. René, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure. So, on the one hand, they're saying that this is necessary. It was a survey by a charity called the Hygiene Bank. Apparently, 80% of teachers have noticed an increase in what they're calling hygiene poverty. I guess in the old days, we call that smelly kids. I don't know. And 40% of teachers are saying they're actually washing their students' uniform, to the point where some schools are installing laundrettes. Now, is that what you call an acceptable intervention, or is it simply nanny state gone mad?
Yeah, hi Martin, nice to see you again. I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept that this is the right way to tackle this problem. You know, lots of people are poor and their children don't have hygiene problems. This is about parents stepping up to the plate and looking after their children, as far as I can tell. Schools should be teaching kids, that's it. not getting involved in their toothbrushing, their nappy training, or washing of their clothes. They certainly shouldn't be using taxpayers' money to install laundrettes. You know, long before washing machines were a feature of every home, people had children who were clean and tidy. You know, my mum was as poor as church mice when they were children. They were always clean and tidy. I grew up in a house with no heating, no washing machine. I was always clean and tidy. We've sort of got this slipping level of standards. And whilst I accept that there will be some parents where there are situations at home which are absolutely dire, that could be, for example, domestic violence, coercion, that kind of thing. For most parents, there is no excuse whatsoever to have dirty children at school. And if we continue to do this, where instead of actually stepping forward and saying, no, this is unacceptable, we actually then provide a solution, it's like raising a child. You promote what you permit, and then it gets worse. I think it's time for us to step back and say, hang on a minute, parents, you should be doing this.
My missus is a teacher. My mum was a teacher her entire life. As you say, there was poverty. There is poverty. We will always see it. And certainly there are a lot of kids at my local primary school where they are having holes in their uniform. They're having holes in their shoes. You know, I had that as a kid. But here's the thing, the problem I've got with this is that it would have been such a badge of shame, you know, for me or anybody in my community to have a teacher step in and do this for us. The parents would have absolutely been mortified that they'd let their standards drop so much that the kids, the teachers, beg your pardon, were having to wash their clothes, clean their teeth, wipe their faces, wipe their backsides, feed them, do everything for them. Is this just the beginning of this huge mission creep where the state is not only the nanny state, but actually becomes our children's de facto actual nanny?
Yeah, absolutely, Martin. And you've hit the nail on the head, because what are we teaching these poor children that are actually going through this, where teachers are having to do these things for them? We're teaching them that this is who does these things for you, that you don't have to be self-resilient, that you don't have to, you know, have standards in life. And it's not their fault. Of course, it's not the children's fault. But what we need to be doing is we should be speaking to the parents and saying, look, you know, little Johnny is getting very embarrassed by the fact that his clothes smell. You need to wash them, Mum. And you know what? It doesn't cost much to get a bar of soap and wash things by hand if that's what you have to do. It's not ideal, but it's sometimes what one has to do.
I think you're right. You know, I mean, I used to wash my clothes. Look, when you're a teenage lad, you smell. You just do. And that's what happens. And I often used to take responsibility for myself. I had a bar of soap, I'd wash my shirt, I'd hang it out the window on a hanger. It costs nothing and you get the job done. But that's because the child, me, have been taught to take care of ourselves, to be resilient. And I just wonder if this constant outsourcing of responsibility doesn't breed stronger children, it breeds weak children.
Well, 100%. And we're seeing that, aren't we? We're seeing children that can't physically cope when they go to university. We've got children at university whose mothers are picking up their washing and doing it for them. Frankly, having dirty clothes and a room that looks a bit, you know, dishevelled at university is a passage. You know, it's a rite of passage that we all go through. But we are telling these kids that they don't have to do anything for themselves. They don't have to have standards. They don't have to be proud. And I think we need to get some of that back in the classroom.
Now, Dr. Rennie, the government are saying they're calling hygiene poverty a stain on our country, and they're also bringing more legislation in to bring down the cost of school uniforms by getting rid of the branded items. I think we can all agree that that's a good idea. But, you know, washing your clothes, taking care of your clothes, that doesn't cost a lot of money. You know, I think a lot of people watching the show will be just feeling that this is just another excuse for schools, the state, to poke their nose in and take over our business.
Well, I do, but I also think that society is to blame because, you know, there's a degree of laziness here because, you know what, when you're a busy working mum and you've got more than one kid maybe, and, you know, I've done it twice now, and it can be really, really hard. And sometimes the last thing I want to do when I get home after dashing around, picking up kids, going to work, getting home, is to then do the washing and the ironing. But you know what? That's my job. That's what I signed up for. So I have to do it. And I might be dog tired, but I have to get myself up and do it because it's my job. I see it as my job.
Well, what I do is I tell my kids they smell and I get them to do it. What's wrong with a bit of shame? What's wrong with a bit of parental responsibility? Dr. Rennie Honderkamp, a spotless performance. Thank you very much for joining me on the show. Thank you very much. Cheers. Well, you don't worry, shaming does work. Now, moving on, Hark the Herald. Well, a British TikToker has sparked outrage by declaring, "Let's make Christmas Palestinian." No thanks. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
What about train Wi-Fi? The Times. It's so funny the Times did this story because I was on the train yesterday trying to do some work and connecting to the Wi-Fi, and it happens all the time. It just doesn't work. It's pathetic. And then I opened the Times and they've done a massive investigation. Loads of different rail routes from north to south.
Was that the James Bond thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's
I think, well, that passenger got through, or almost got through, one episode one James Bond
film.
movie in 8 hours.
But you know, it's interesting. We call it train Wi-Fi, but it isn't. It's just really a SIM card on a train, really. So if your own phone's not going to get signal, why would we assume that the train's going to have signal? It just doesn't work like that. Unless you're in Japan or South Korea, whose infrastructure is infinitely better than ours, you're just not going to get signal. You have to download those films way before you get on
There is technology that can help with that. You know, there really is. If they found ways to put it underground, they can get it on ground and get you going. I definitely think, you know, with the price that we're paying for these tickets, they can get the Wi-Fi going. There is technology.
That's why it's so frustrating, isn't
Call
it?
Elon, get a Starlink. Let's go.
If you're a passenger paying hundreds of pounds for a season ticket or whatever you call it, and you commute to work every single day, and you're paying all this money, and you can't.
It's so
get
expensive.
Wi-Fi.
You'd expect Wi-Fi at the basic. Yeah, exactly.
But it happens with phone signal as well. I'll be walking down London in Park Lane or somewhere else or down on the south coast. I just don't have phone signal, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on?
Doesn't it feel like 5G's made it worse, though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like 4G, that didn't happen so much, but 5G just feels like...
Yeah, and then I always get this little E in the top corner of my phone, and I don't get any signal. I think it's got worse over the past couple of years. Yeah, especially with 5G. I agree with that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 10 to 6 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, here's one for you. Is it time to make Christmas Palestinian? Well, that's the view of one TikToker from Britain who thinks we should make this year's Christmas the most Palestinian Christmas that ever was. Well, let's take a little listen.
Now, what I think we need to do is make Christmas Palestinian as much as we possibly can. That means decorating your tree, perhaps with some Palestinian decorations, maybe telling your family, your children about how Jesus was a Palestinian and how Christmas is a Palestinian story. Mostly it's about supporting Palestinian businesses, whether that's with presents, whether that's through donations, however you want to do it. The most important message that we get out this year is that Christmas is Palestinian. Make Christmas Palestinian again.
No. Let's not make Christmas Palestinian, because it's not a Palestinian festive period. It's a Christian festive period. It's about celebrating Christmas, whether or not you believe in Christ, whether or not you believe in any God. It's a part and parcel of Western history to be celebrated. It's got diddly squat to do with Palestine. Is this country utterly a lost cause? Well, let's see now what the comedian Josh Howie thinks of this. Josh, welcome to the show. Still loving your newly shorn head, by the way. It's taken me a while to get used to, but it's a beautiful thing. Tell us, should Christmas be Palestinian?
No, not at all. I mean, this is a core sort of characteristics of what you can call pro-Palestinian activism, which is different from being for a Palestinian state, which I happen to be. But these activists, they are ahistorical, and there is nothing that they won't try and co-opt into this anti-Western ideology. And this is just the latest one, whether it is the climate change, whatever it is, it's so frustrating. And of course, what makes this so ridiculous is anybody who knows anything about history is Jesus was a Jew. He was from Judea. It didn't get changed. The Romans changed it to Syria, Palestina, over 100 years after Jesus died. And this is what the Palestinian cause does. It co-opts everything and this is sorry to say this, but there's very little Palestinian history in and of itself. There's no such thing as a Palestinian language or a Palestinian currency or a Palestinian king. Those things don't exist because there's never been a sovereign state called Palestine. So all they can do is just co-opt everything else out there. By the way, this woman who showed the clip of, wasn't it, Fiona Ryan, she's just been a few days ago convicted of anti-Semitism, of 6 breaches of the Communication Act. She somehow was allowed out. Evidence, of course, of two-tier policing here. She can put this hateful stuff online, and there's truly some atrocious things that she put out there, to the point where the judge actually said that she was disgusting and nauseating. Yet she gets a condition, gets a suspended sentence. Yet other people, of course, are going to jail.
Josh, moving on, do you think this is part of a broader airbrushing out or even cancellation of Christmas? I've noticed we went out on the streets of London at the weekend. Look, there's practically no mention of Christmas. It's now the holiday period, a winter festival. Let's celebrate, they say. But celebrate what? The C word is being airbrushed from history. Is this part of a gradual and more deeper erosion of the Christmas period?
Yeah, you saw the school the other day that they had erased any Christmas or Christmas songs from their, from their plays. And this is exactly part of that. You have to, being Christian is part of the indigenous, arguably, culture to the UK, and to just kind of pretend that Christmas is not part of this period, or Christianity is not part of this period, is disrespectful.
Okay,
and
Josh,
again,
we have to leave it. We have to leave it there. A cracker of an interview as ever. Thank you very much for joining me on the show. Always a pleasure. Now that's it from me for now. But Jubes & Co is up next, and I'll be back at 7 o'clock this evening. I'm covering for Nigel Farage. See you then. But before that, here's your weather with Alex Burkill.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. There's some pretty cold weather across parts of the UK at the moment, and with that, there's the risk of some disruptive snow as we go through the next 24 hours, because a frontal system is going to push in and bump into the cold air currently across many northern parts, leading to the rain turning to snow. Already as we go through the end of the afternoon, some snow over higher ground of Northern Ireland, but it's across parts of northern England where we're likely to see the greatest disruption from the snow, potentially 20 centimetres of lying snow above some higher ground, even a little bit to lower levels potentially. Further north, some wintry showers for northern Scotland, some clearer skies across other parts of Scotland, leading to a harsh frost here, temperatures perhaps falling as low as -8, but it's a milder, albeit cloudier and perhaps damp story further south. As we go through tomorrow morning then, those wintry showers could bring a bit of sleet, bit of snow, also some icy patches, so some difficult conditions first thing. A drier story though across more central and southern parts of Scotland. And by the morning, most of the wet and wintry weather will have cleared through Northern Ireland, and it will be clearing away from parts of northern England too. Further south, it's a milder start to the day. There will be some outbreaks of rain, but again, most of that will be clearing away towards the east as we go through the morning. A lot of dry weather then following in behind, and things should turn a bit sunnier as well for many places, especially towards the north. But towards the southwest here, there will be some outbreaks of rain around, and some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. We will see our temperatures actually dropping for some places as we go through the day. A real chilly feel to things, and with some brisk winds coming in from the north, it is going to feel particularly cold indeed. We stick with that northerly wind as we go through the end of the day, so still some wind